when Kamala lost in November, everywhere I looked for like 4 to 6 months was deep conversations about the myriad ways that people felt that Biden f***ed up and Kamala f***ed up and Democrats f***ed up. I mean, we talked about it on Live and Learn for like 2 months straight.
Yeah, but every time you bring up the fact that her refusal to distance herself from like an increasingly unpopular administration, what ends up happening, it's never just, yep, you're right, she should have done more to distance herself. It's an immediate, you have to understand the position that she was in. It's very difficult. She had no choice but to run the campaign the way that she did.
Wait, what?
Well, if you want to say right now
Nobody on
that
Live
she
and Learn
should have
said
done
this.
more to like
we all talked about
distance herself from them.
No, we all talked about the fact that Joe Biden calling her and saying no daylight was insanely narcissistic, egotistical, and selfish. The problem of this aversion to internal critique, I think, is much more widespread in progressive spaces. I mean, you and me had a conversation last time we had a conversation, and you were making the case that Bernie got rat in 2016 and 2020. You weren't talking about like his shortcomings with black voters. You were talking about like he got rat, it wasn't fair, it was stolen from him. So I think, I could be wrong, but I think you were in the Live and Learn chat on the day that we were talking about, because Ezra Klein was kind of popping off, and I know he triggers the out of socialists, the far left. Like, is it safe to say that you despise Ezra Klein, or?
No, he definitely triggers me, but I don't despise him, no.
Okay. I think that's what we were talking about. I saw you in the chat, and you were disagreeing with me quite a bit. So I figured, hey, might as well just go directly to the source.
Yeah, because his argument to me, and you expanded it to be, I think, more charitable, or like distilling it down to its essence, of like a fundamentally different argument than what he had advanced, both in the conversation with Ross Douthat, who's a columnist for the New York Times, as well as Ta-Nehisi Coates, where he defended it there as well, that Democrats need to embrace these unorthodox candidates to be able to win back political power, defeat Republicans, and exert that. And one of those things that they need to be open to doing is potentially running anti-choice or pro-forced birth candidates. And to me, that is like, if the argument is what you interpreted it to be, which is that we need to not be so, we need to drop the purity tests, we need to be more pragmatic about like just winning overall and getting more Democrats elected, even if they don't have the exact platform that, moderate Dems, liberal Dems, progressive Dems want. We need to have room for that so we can win and get the majority of the agenda passed and protect the existing rights and wins that we've made thus far. But since he said, and he kept specifically saying, no, run anti-choice Democrats and like be okay with it, that's where I'm like, but why? Because that to me is like, that's one of the few issues where Democrats have broad public support right now, like across, partisan lines, with Republicans, with independents, and it has salience, and it's not an issue that they're afraid to touch. And so for him to say that in particular is just like mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, where is he getting that? I don't think empirically he's backed up, because you look at poll data from Pew, it backs up what I'm saying, which is that being pro-choice is broadly popular. Even in red states like in Kansas and Missouri, they rejected wholesale abortion bans in their state. In some cases, they went so far as to protect, or to add in amendments protecting abortion rights. And then in other states, or in other examples, I just don't like that. That was an issue that even Harris was popular on. So why he's saying that is just weird to me.
So he was speaking to the district level when he was talking about possibly running candidates. I don't even think he was excluding state or local politics too. And it's true that you've seen red states pass pro-choice agendas, pro-choice legislation. There was constitutional amendment, I think, in Kansas or Missouri, one of the two or both. But if you break it down at a district level, you could surely find districts in this country where a majority of people are pro-life, right? And so the question would be, I think we need to get at a few different things in this conversation. So for you, it's important to stay really principled on, is it just this issue? What are some other issues that you feel like Democrats should not give a single inch on?
I look at it broadly as this is something that we had a fight that had been deemed won, right? Like Roe v. Wade was the law of the land, and abortions were constitutionally protected under the 14th Amendment. And then Roe v. Wade's overturned, and now you're seeing the gutting of reproductive rights across the country. Now they've moved on to trying to get the abortion pill. Like RFK Jr. is saying, like, we're going to convene panels to see if like abortion's linked to like to autism or something. I have no fucking clue. So this is a thing that has been largely gutted, and Democrats need to, you know, increase the fight to win it back. And luckily voters are on the Democrat side far more than they are on the Republican side with respect to being pro-choice and not wanting these things like federal abortion bans, not even wanting them in their state. So I see that as different than saying like every single Democrat needs to be outspoken on like trans rights, for example. Is that what I want? Obviously, I want Democrats to be outspoken about being in support of an important civil rights battle of our time. But to me, it's like it's different because you're talking about a right that had been won and then was under attack and is being currently gutted versus a civil rights battle or other issues similar to the fight for trans rights, where you are currently trying to win hearts and minds, win the public over, and there's an ongoing conversation about it. And I don't see that with being pro-choice. That to me, it would just be Democrats abandoning something that they had been known for fighting for decades, in favor of what? We're going to alienate one of the strong, like, you know, Democrats do very, very well with women. We're going to alienate them to try to attract like white people, like white men, back into the tent. Maybe if that works. I think that that's a very, very risky gamble. I don't see the evidence to back up that trade-off's even going to work, as opposed to something like, you know, trans rights or whatever. I can understand and be more sympathetic to like, hey, this particular candidate in this purple district is not going to be able to be outspoken in the same way Dems running in safe blue districts can be outspoken about those sorts of social issues. You know, he didn't make the argument that it's like a messaging thing. He said, no, they should be willing to drop it entirely. And to me, it's like, go gamble away your own rights, dude. Why are you coming for reproductive rights when they've already been gutted and attacked, and now like even further you want to trade them away?
I think he was trying to get at just a really kind of straightforward problem that the Democratic Party faces right now, which is, and I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he said it was, you know, easier to imagine, you know, the sun not rising tomorrow than the Democrats having a 60-seat majority, you know, in the next like 4 years. And, you know, he's right about that. Like, I don't know about you, but I've never entertained the possibility of like a 60 vote majority in any kind of recent elections. The last time something like that was possible was back in 2009. I don't really see it, frankly, possible for Republicans either right now. Like, it's just that polarized. And so if you see that issue and you understand that you can only get really transformational legislation if you have 60 votes, like, can I ask, like, what is your alternative to what he's proposing? It's like, so if it's not getting rid of purity testing and being a lot more flexible with
but that's not what he said, Hutch. That's not what he said. What he said was specifically they need to be open to running these pro-life candidates or the anti-choice candidates. And to me, it's like, no, one, they're already doing that. This idea that Democrats are like really, really outspoken about being pro-choice, not the case. You have examples like I canvass for, like, there are already examples of pro-life Democrats that were endorsed by Democratic leaders like Pelosi over the pro-choice candidates. Henry Cuellar is an example of this. Well, he ended up being like indicted on like bribery and corruption charges, right?
He's the only example. He's literally the only pro-life Democrat in the entire House, and she endorsed him the same that she endorsed every incumbent. Like, that's the Democratic Party's policy, is to endorse all incumbents. So we went from having,
she went back on that because she endorsed the Kennedy in a race where he wasn't the incumbent against Markey's reelection, I think. So one, Pelosi wasn't even consistent on that. Two, that Democrat ended up being, again, like, indicted on bribery charges, and he voted with Republicans. He was honestly a Republican with an R with the D next to his name.
I would have to look at his record, but I'm saying, like, you were kind of pushing back against the idea that the Democratic Party has not really been a strong champion of like codifying Roe or like being pro-choice, but the party went from having like over 50 pro-life Democrats in the House and over a dozen pro-life Democrats in the Senate when Obama was inaugurated to having one, you know, so the party did move substantially left on this issue. And And I think like,
no, I said they hadn't been outspoken about it. Not that they haven't been like pro-choice or whatever, that like they have it. If you find somewhere in like their campaign websites or something like that, I know that they list that like, I'm going to secure reproductive rights. I want it to be safe, legal, rare or whatever. But there were different times where Democrats had majorities in both houses of Congress back in the 2000s, and they did not codify Roe v. Wade. They did not repeal the Comstock Act, which is like an archaic law that punishes women for having abortions. Like there were different times where Democrats could have picked up the mantle of really advancing and cementing abortion rights in this country, and they just didn't.
So this is actually kind of like a perfect, it ties in perfectly to what we're talking about, because the only time that, so you agree that codifying Roe would have taken breaking a filibuster, right? You can't do that through budget reconciliation, so it would have required 60 votes, right? And so the only time that Democrats have only had 60 votes in the last, I don't even, fucking 50 years or 60 years, would be Barack Obama in 2009, right? And when that happened, the Democrats only had that 60 vote threshold for like 23 calendar days. There was a court challenge to Al Franken's seat in Minnesota, I believe is where he was serving. And so he wasn't actually sworn in until like 8 or 9 months into Obama's term. Senator Kennedy fucking died during that time. And so there was a process of like replacing him. And so they had a really, really limited window. And Barack Obama chose the first 2 years of his presidency to focus on two things, which was the economic recovery and the ACA. And during those negotiations that he was engaged with congressional Democrats, there were, as I just mentioned a minute ago, like dozens, so like several dozen pro-life Democrats who were serving in the Congress at the time, who were telling. No,
I know Obama said like it's not going to be a priority to codify Roe. He explicitly said that, I think, in 2009.
No, but why do you think he said that though?
Because like you said, there were at the time they had many more anti-choice Democrats part of the party. Right. But I'm saying that there should have been attempts to codify it, and then you had the head of the party trying to discourage their attempts to do it.
Well, what does that mean?
So that we went down this line because I said Democrats are the more pro-choice candidate-like party, obviously, over Republicans, but they've not been as outspoken about this issue as they could have been. And when it's been put to these ballot initiatives, even in red states, there's actually more salience among this issue than I think even Democrats realized, even among independents and Republicans, and obviously among their base. So it was, to me, not something they should have been as cowardly on.
So the reason I bring this up is because the reason I'll just skip all the fucking shit and just jump to the point. The reason why Obama said that was because he got a letter from those pro-life Democrats. Anybody can Google this. Like he got the pro-life Democrats that were serving in the House, they wrote him a letter, and it was basically saying that if 1 single cent of abortion funding goes into the ACA, any federal funds from the ACA go towards abortions, we will not support that legislation. They were also sending him another clear signal. If you even think about trying to codify Roe, we're not going to support the ACA. So was it wrong for him to say that, or was he making a really pragmatic choice in the moment that led to the passage of the ACA? So your options are you don't get to codify Roe and you don't get the ACA, or you don't get to codify Roe and you get the ACA. Like, what is the better option there?
No, well, that's not the dichotomy that's presented. If you're asking me, was it a mistake for him to say that? Yeah, I think it's a mistake for him to go out of his way to say that that is not a legislative priority for us. He could have just said nothing. He could have just said nothing. And then there could have been a push from, bottom up for them to repeal the Comstock Act or try to push to codify Roe.
He didn't do that for no reason, though. Like, he was in tough negotiations to get the ACA over the finish line. And him making that statement was a gesture to those pro-life Democrats to try to help those negotiations. He didn't just do that just to like fuck with people. He did that. That was a political calculation.
I'm not saying that he did it just to fuck with people, but if you're asking me, should he have done it? Should that be the thing that is like dangled in front of people? No, I don't think so.
If that was the difference between
that's what happened. The ACA gets passed, and now to hear somebody in 2025 make the argument we need to go back to those sorts of politics. Like, if you want to argue about different ways to be more pragmatic to amass more political power and different strategies and tactics, I'm game. But what Ezra Klein argued is that they need to be open to running more anti-choice Democrats for some reason, even though we have, again, broad consensus on this. So why are we going to go back on that?
Well, I said
it's popular.
I said a moment ago, like, surely you could find districts, like certain districts in the country that would be majority pro-life. Would you dispute that?
I'm sure, yeah.
Well, that's.
But do we even know that that's going to be the thing? That's the difference for voters between them picking the Dem candidate over the Republican?
No, we don't. I don't know if Ezra was like making a specific prescription in terms of like giving you specific districts, like here it would work, here it would work. I do think he was sort of getting at a larger point about sort of expanding what we consider to be acceptable members of the coalition. Like he was making the point very extremely with this one particular issue. But I do think he was getting at a larger point. If we want to imagine or reimagine like a 60 Dem senator majority, then he's saying that these conversations are necessary. So you would either have to demonstrate that you could accomplish that through some kind of different method, or you would just simply say, like, I would rather not have a 60 vote majority if it meant having any pro-life Democrats. Like, which one do you lean on there? Do you think there's an alternative to get to 60 votes?
Well, like, first, I think a lot of the backlash is coming not from people being like triggered at the idea of like, you know, unorthodox strategies for Democrats to win. It's, again, the fact that he repeated multiple times, no, you got to try running anti-choice candidates, that people are like, where are you getting this from? Because, again, no data for that to suggest that that's going to be the right move for Democrats to make, that he had not identified or spoken to a specific district where that could be the recipe to like flipping a seat red or something, or like from red to blue. And then I think so the backlash comes from not a conversation about pragmatism, because, again, it wouldn't have been as controversial. I feel like it was a little bit of the Mott and Bailey from him, where he like stakes out this more controversial position of like, we need to be open to running anti-choice Democrats in 2025 for some reason. And then if he just backs up and he's retreating to the like, I'm just saying we need to be willing to embrace creative strategies to win, that's the safer position that nobody's going to disagree with. So that's why he got the backlash. I don't think it's people just being crazy and unpragmatic, but what the second question is about winning majorities, right?
Yeah, like
how are they going to do that?
Yeah, what is your sort of path to 60 votes in the Senate?
I don't think it's you know, talking about compromising on issues where we don't need to before there's just a solid amount of evidence showing that it's an issue that Democrats cannot win on, even though it's been part of their platform. So they need to drop it or, you know, change up their position on it to appeal to voters in particular districts, in particular municipalities, states, et cetera, to be able to win back power. Other than that, I think Democrats would do better to have a unified front and be more outspoken about the policies and platforms that they already champion. I think there's been so much of an emphasis on Democrats kind of like, it's good to have polling data and focus groups informing your messaging and your interviews and all of that. But even David Pakman was talking about this recently with the Kamala Harris staffer, that Democrats have gotten to the point where they don't even seem to realize, like, what are they even running for? Because they seem just so paralyzed when they're in front of the media that they kind of end up rambling, or just they're not responsive to questions in the moments from journalists that are inoffensive asking them about their agenda, and they're just doing everything that they can to like not get into the specifics. And I think that really reduces voter confidence in the candidate and the party as a whole, when it seems like the people that are running just don't really seem to stand for anything. And it's obvious that they're constantly trying to play all sides to not alienate anybody. But when you try not to alienate anybody, I feel like you uninspire everybody and you alienate almost everybody, because it doesn't seem like you have any fight in you.
So I saw the same interview that you're talking about, and I think he helped her during her 2020 primary. I don't think he was a staffer in 2024. But he was sort of getting at what you're talking about, which is like there's this perception of inauthenticity that's sort of a problem in the Democratic Party right now, and I don't even necessarily disagree, but that's a pretty nebulous kind of strategy that you're putting forward here. So, like, I asked you, what's your plan to get like bigger,
nebulous, Hutch? I'm saying that they need to look at the issues that are the most popular among Democrats, that poll the best if they're interested in looking at polls, and they need to be outspoken about running on those issues unapologetically.
How is that going to help them in like Wyoming or Montana?
You didn't ask me how I was going to help women in Wyoming specifically. You asked me how are Dems supposed to get more seats, and I'm saying this is how they can get more seats. They need to be authentic, come off as authentic, and have a platform that they run on, stick to, and are unapologetic with, and they're not constantly like worried, like, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing and it be used against me. Like, stand for something and just run on that and go with it.
I mean, so what states would you focus on?
You know, it's funny that we were talking about like West Virginia for like almost 80 years was almost solidly Democrats. And then you just made the comment that Ezra Klein made about like, it's easier, like the actual quote is like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than like the end of capitalism or something like that. And he's saying it's like easier to imagine like, you know, X crazy thing happening instead of Democrats having like these majorities and stuff like that. West Virginia is an example that has turned hard red. It's like now I think the second reddest state in the country, but it wasn't always like that. As a longer tradition of actually being blue and being filled with like Dixiecrats and stuff like that were pro-labor. And in 2016, Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary was able to win, I think, almost every single county over Clinton. And so his populist messaging and appeal to these, you know, micro-targeting these voters that had been left behind by like, you know, free trade agreements like NAFTA, by talking about strong unions or whatever, this was able to get a populist candidate who openly calls himself a democratic socialist to win in the primary specifically, right?
You think Bernie Sanders would have been competitive in West Virginia in 2016?
Yes, if he had secured the nominee, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
But he didn't.
West Virginia 2016 presidential election results. I just want to see what the margin is.
No, it swung hard for Trump.
In 2024, I think it was like a 40-point margin. Results. Hold on. Let me just look at this real quick. West Virginia, that was a 42-point margin. And you're saying that you think Bernie Sanders could have been competitive in West Virginia?
Because again, if he had gone on to become the candidate, because Clinton didn't do well in that particular state.
That's kind of astounding to me. Do you seriously think that he would have overperformed Hillary Clinton by a margin of like 30 or 40 points?
No, he did overperform Hillary Clinton. I think that, and then if he had won, he would have beaten Trump in that state. I believe it. Yeah. Because again, like you're looking at, it's only very, very recently that West Virginia has become this red. You know that, right?
Yeah, I'm aware that West Virginia was a blue state at times.
Yeah, not decades and decades and decades. It was mostly blue.
I mean, that's pretty. So, that's a pretty big claim. What you're saying here, you're just casually saying that Bernie Sanders would have outperformed Hillary Clinton by a margin of at least 25 to 30 points to get a simple majority. I
don't know about that. I'd say he would have won. I think that he would have won that state.
Okay.
Is that Hutch? The claim is just if Bernie Sanders had advanced to the general, right, I think he could have gotten West Virginia. That's the only claim I'm making. I'm not saying he would have won with flying colors.
But
I'm saying I think he could have beat Donald Trump in 2016.
But I'm saying that's extraordinary. She got 26% of the vote. So you're saying that he would have gotten it, he would have ran at least 25 points.
But you would expect that because she didn't win in the primary at all. In the majority of the counties in West Virginia, those Dem voters, to the extent that they were still active at that time, rejected her. Well, she got horrible margins also with them.
Well, where is the evidence of this happening like elsewhere in the country? Like where else are you seeing, you know, economically populist candidates do, or like really progressive far left leaning candidates do like really well in deep red districts and states? Like where is this actually happening?
Where's the evidence that Ezra Klein that anti-choice Dems is going to help them win? Well, and that's what all of this starts back on. He doesn't have the evidence for that. He's just, if we're being generous and he's only positing that as a hypothesis and a potential strategy or whatever, he's got no numbers. All the opposite supports him. Like again, Arizona voters passed constitutional amendment guaranteeing abortion access. That was 2024. Missouri voters approve Amendment 3, overturn state's abortion ban. This is November 5th, 2024. Ohio the same, Kansas the same.
Right. I think his evidence is that the more moderate candidates in competitive districts have measurably, demonstrably done better than further left candidates. This is just like something that we have observed in the data over the last like 4 election cycles. And I don't think you can give me a single example of like a far left candidate performing well in like a deep red district or state. I just like, where is that?
I don't have it offhand. I'm sure I could like go and find it or whatever. But I mean, like looking at Zohran Mamdani, if I told you just a few months ago, did you know that a young Muslim, openly democratic socialist candidate who is not a staunch, like openly pro-Israel guy in New York City might end up becoming the mayor pretty soon? Would you have believed that?
Probably not. No. But I mean, but New York, that's New York City. We're talking about West Virginia. You know,
I'm only talking about like you're like, that's crazy that you think Bernie could have won West Virginia in 2016. I really do think that if he had advanced to the general. But I'm telling you that like, yeah, unpredictable things can happen in U.S. electoral politics. We have historical trends, but you know, the history is not predetermined. You can't know for sure what's going to like. And I'm just saying that you're like, that just seems crazy. Where are the examples of like, you know, these things? And I'm saying crazier things are happening currently, and you're seeing like a lot of success with them. So
New York City is a very different electorate than like, okay, so if I just like pull up the map on the screen,
Hutch, I know New York City is a very different electorate.
Well, you have to contend with that, right? Like you can't use Mamdani as an example and then say just do what Mamdani did, because like, do you think Mamdani like
I'm not saying do what Mamdani did. I'm saying that it's an example of a candidate that against all odds was able to succeed. So I'm saying that the unorthodox strategies, if we're just, you know, broadening Ezra Klein's claim to, they need to be willing to embrace unorthodox like strategies to be able to win. Sometimes it might look like Zohran Mamdani, and you're already seeing people try to replicate the success of his campaign in their own ads. Other times it might look a lot more conservative, and it might look closer to just running as like a moderate, running closer to like, you know, a race like fucking Slotkin or Latimer, unfortunately. Isn't that what Ezra Klein was getting to? Just he was getting at the same idea, just from a really kind of extreme application of that logic, right? No. I took him to at his word that both times when he just said they need to be running, like they need to be open to running pro-choice candidates with no data on his side, that is the kind of the start and end of his argument. If we want to have a separate conversation about like a broader strategy, sure, but like now we're inserting things into Ezra Klein, like into his words that he just literally never said. I think, would you disagree that I think what he was getting at was this idea that we used to have members of the Democratic Party coalition, like the party was not always this kind of like purity tested. And there were plenty of examples of not even like that. You don't even have to go that far back to see, you know, like massive Democratic Party coalitions that included a very ideologically diverse. It included racists. I know it included segregationists. It included all sorts of different cohorts that were completely unsavory. It really did. Yes. I mean, if you go back to FDR, for example, I mean, do you think that FDR should have like principally just pushed all the segregationists out of, do you think that would have been the correct decision for him at the time, was to just like kick all the segregationists out of the party? No. Because there's a political reality for him to contend with, that the country is fucking racist. The country is filled with segregationists. Both parties have this, but you don't see that with it when it comes to reproductive rights, because when you're contending with an electorate like that, it's not even in the conversation. Like, are we get or the conversation is still burgeoning. Are we going to introduce civil rights reform? Are we going to discontinue segregation? Is there going to be Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera? Like, that's a conversation in the same way that trans rights is still burgeoning, right? That is advancing, but the electorate's where they're at on that, right? So you have to contend with that. As opposed to reproductive rights, where it's like, no, the conversation has advanced past that. You don't see a large swath of Democrats that are pro-choice when you pull them, or that are anti-choice when you pull them, right? It's like, I think around like 30% of Democrats. I'm not really sure. So it's like not even a plurality, because if it were 33, then you could at least say it was a plurality. I might be 30% of Democrats. It sounds like it might be a low priority for them. Or if they're identifying that way, is it like Biden, where like Biden says he's personally anti-choice, but then as far as his political decisions, he acts like he's pro-choice? Because that could be where those Dems are coming from. And then we don't even know, is it a priority? Because what Ezra is talking about is trying to, I thought, get Republican voters. That this is a wedge issue for them. They're almost single issue voters, and it's important. If we if we just like steelman Ezra Klein's, or maybe not even steelman it, but like, let's just say for the sake of a hypothetical, because I'm just curious to hear what your answer would be. Let's say Ezra Klein's strategy, like we could demonstrate that it would work. I'm not saying that we can, and I'm not saying that, I don't even know if what Ezra is saying is based on any kind of data. He could just be going off of his gut. I'm not really sure. But let's say there is validity to the strategy, and you could net
like a not insignificant amount of seats in the House and the Senate if you were to throw institutional support behind anti-choice candidates in really red states and districts where that position might be the difference between winning and losing. And let's say after you build a coalition by doing that, you were able to pass single payer healthcare. Do you think that that would be a strategy that you would support?
Yeah. In the world where, in the universe where the world is made of jello and also these options are on the table, yes, I would support that. But I don't think that's the world we live in. If that were the case, if that were the reality, if that were the paradigm, it would be less controversial what he said, and I would be more willing to hear him out, because we would have to be contending with the fact that just so much of the American population is not where I want them to be on reproductive rights, and there's still a lot of work to be done to win hearts and minds and to win people over to being open to expanding reproductive rights. But it seems like this is almost like open and shut among the electorate, and now it's just a matter of getting the law to reflect where Americans are at on it, because now the law is not actually in line with where the majority of independents, Republicans, and Democrats are on this issue. So I don't want to put candidates forward that are going to erode those even more than they already have been.
So your issue is not so much with the strategy itself. You're saying the strategy is not viable because you see the issue of abortion as being just like a pure winner for Democrats across the board, like in every state and every district, that kind of thing?
I don't know about every district, but at least at the state level, when it was put to a referendum in 2022, 2023, 2024, voters overwhelmingly, and like 60% of voters going to say, we are rejecting a statewide abortion ban, and in some cases we want to actually enshrine abortion rights in our state constitution, even in red states, which is very, very impressive to me. And if anything, it's an argument that Republicans should be more open to running the pro-choice candidates, because that's closer to where the electorate is at than Democrats being open to backsliding on this issue and running anti-choice candidates.
Maybe you might be right.
Because the data's on our side with that one, don't you think?
You might be right about that for sure.
And we can think. I can think of one person. It's Suzanne Collins, right? Is a Republican who's like she says she's pro-choice.
I think Susan. Well, I don't know if she's pro-choice, but she was pro like Roe v. Wade. I think.
Yeah, something like that. But like, you know, she runs that way, but then what does she do? She gets into office and then she votes to confirm anti-choice Supreme Court judges and justices. So to me, it's like you ran on that.
I think she voted against Kavanaugh and maybe Amy Coney Barrett as well.
Let me see.
Did she vote for all of his nominees?
Collins, even if she voted for just one, vote for Trump's Supreme Court picks. But basically, as far as I know, she paid lip service to and like signals that like I'm more pro-choice or I'm more, you know, moderate when it comes to abortion. But then when you see the way that she votes, it's so much closer to an anti-choice agenda than it is to a pro-choice agenda. So if the other argument could be that Democrats should lie to people, signal that they're anti-choice, but then when they get in office, vote pro-choice, then it really is an aesthetic thing at that point. And I'm like, we can, I guess, talk about the ethics of like duping people to get into office and then voting against what you said you'd run on. I think that's principally wrong. But as far as what's good for me, I want to see reproductive rights enshrined. So if they did that, you wouldn't hear a complaint from me because I think people need to get on board with reproductive rights.
But if I could hypothetically, because I just want to know like principally where you're at, because it sounds like you're not as inflexible as a lot of other people who really do believe in like the purity testing, like the type of candidates that we run have to meet like a very certain minimum standard across like a myriad issues. But it sounds like you're more flexible on it. Cause like for example, if I could show you data to suggest that we could actually expand the races that we would be competitive in by like 25 or 30 races if we ran like a pro-life candidate in those districts or states, it sounds like you might be open to that, because a moment ago you said that you would be okay with that kind of a coalition if it meant single payer, right?
If it meant single payer, and at that point, again, I think that just speaks to the fact that most of like, it's like for people to be, for Democratic activists to be demanding this purity test across all 50 states for an issue that's clearly not settled among the American public, that to me is like wish casting. I'm like, you don't have the numbers to be demanding this sort of purity test just yet, right? As opposed to, but like, we do have the numbers with this. That's why it's strange to me. So yes, to answer your question, yes, if there was a large cohort of anti-choice but pro-single-payer Democrats, which I can't even imagine, but if that existed, I would work with them to pass single-payer and then never let up the fight for reproductive rights. You just do it at the same time and keep pushing, et cetera, until you're able to codify Roe v. Wade's, like win these back, right? But that to me is like, it's such a different, it's hard to even imagine this political reality. That's like saying, like, what if we dropped same-sex, like marriage equality, but we get Medicare for all? I'm like, maybe. I can't even imagine this, though. I can't imagine where these people are that want, like the Democratic voters specifically, that are anti-marriage equality, but are pro-Medicare for all. Where are these people? That sounds like an independent. It sounds like a Republican that could be flipped, or it sounds like a non-voter that has like is a black box as far as like trying to figure out what's going to be the one issue that motivates them to get to the polls and vote for a Dem.
So Arkansas, for example, I think has a majority oppose abortion. Like 57% of Arkansas apparently thinks that abortion should always be illegal, compared to 41%. That's according to a Pew Research poll. And I have to assume that there would be other states as well. I mean, I agree with you that the issue overall is one of the strengths of the Democratic Party right now, and it showed up in really unconventional ways. But like when we look at, I think like Ohio and Missouri, like these are like R plus, 8 to 12 states, as opposed to Arkansas, which is like a R plus, 20 or 30 or whatever it is. And I think you could probably find other states that are deep red, that are anti-choice, that are pro like banning abortion. So theoretically, I feel like you could probably find a lot of opportunities to run as an anti-choice candidate where it would increase your odds of success. I don't know. It's all very abstract.
The anti-choice candidate that votes for single payer. Like, I want to meet this candidate. Who are they? Because it just sounds like a unicorn candidate in a unicorn district that doesn't exist. But if you could find me districts where like you keep seeing at these really local races, these kind of like heterodox or ideologically idiosyncratic Democrats that are like pro Second Amendment, they're anti-choice, but they're also very pro union and they're pro Medicare for all. And they are like this kind of weird mishmash or whatever, I think and they're succeeding and they're winning. I would hear Ezra Klein out, but he didn't have a single example. I don't think did he ever at any point in the conversation with Ross Douthat and Ta-Nehisi Coates point to a specific candidate that did this and was met with success. I think maybe he said one. It was a guy, but I wasn't sure.
Was it not?
I thought he was a Republican.
I'm not sure.
No, it wasn't Cuellar. It was somebody else who's been elected in the last couple of years. I'll have to like go through it.
I don't know.
And really quick, so Susan Collins voted to confirm Gorsuch, and then she voted to she provided a crucial yes vote for Kavanaugh's confirmation, but she was the only Republican to vote against Barrett's confirmation.
Gotcha. Okay. I knew it was at least one of them. I don't know. I think you're kind of underselling a little bit the idea that there could be people that are religiously conservative but would be open to a program like single payer, some kind of like massive reform of healthcare, some kind of like expansion of the welfare state. That does seem to be becoming a lot more common these days, where you have people that are socially conservative, but like
the 30 Rock meme.
Yeah, we've been talking about that, but like that's becoming a thing, like for sure. And so, I mean, I don't think I'm qualified to break down each issue and sort of tell you like which issue would be stronger in which state. I'll leave that up to the pollsters that are much more data driven and they get more granular with the data. But the idea itself, like I appreciate it, at the very least Ezra Klein for having this conversation so publicly and actually like provoking a larger conversation about how we see coalitions in the left-wing movement in this country, just like the broad left-wing movement. I mean, I don't think even you would deny, right, that like we have moved towards a much more kind of, there's a much more kind of strictly enforced orthodoxy, I think. That just wasn't really the case for, decades. Us not having that kind of orthodoxy was the reason why stuff like Social Security and Medicare were signed into law in the first place. You had a situation where back then, like the Communist Party in the United States endorsed FDR when FDR was very outspoken against socialism and communism. Like his whole thing.
Yeah, he did the New Deal to save capitalism.
Right. Yeah, that was his exact express purpose. I mean, and then you had civil rights leaders, you know, Black Americans who were living under Jim Crow still, who endorsed FDR, even though he was on the record against anti-lynching legislation because he knew it would alienate Southern segregationists. So, you know,
well, I take Ta-Nehisi's position on that because he says if that's what a politician has to do to be able to get their legislative agenda done, then I can understand that and I can accept that. But is it my responsibility as a journalist, as a voter, as a Black American to not criticize that decision at that time from if I'm somebody living in FDR's America? I think not. He said, I think it's my job to continue to push the needle on that and to continue the fight for this and to not be praising them for this because that is not, they did all of those things in spite while being met with opposition. Because I know he must have had support simultaneously from these pro-segregation, you know, Dixiecrats, Democrats or whatever. And simultaneously, he was probably also met with a lot of outspoken opposition from people who generally supported him, but thought he was dead wrong when it came to civil rights and that he wasn't going far enough when it came to being segregation.
But the coalition held. I mean, it was a very strong coalition. And the fact of the matter is like, I feel like the Democratic Party gets a lot of grief from I hear from like the far left because I feel like they're not big
from me,
but people like you, like they're people. The big criticism that I hear the most from you guys is that they don't do enough with power when they have the power. And I think that this is a very, and very oftentimes people like Obama are compared to like, well, why didn't he do what LBJ did? And why didn't he do what FDR did? The fact of the matter is like, you know, racist Dixiecrats were, and segregationists were an essential part of the Democratic coalition for decades. And like, that was the reason why they had a big enough mandate to actually pursue these enormous, like bold policy agendas. And that coalition collapsed over the course of like a few decades and with the implementation of the Southern Strategy and the Dixiecrats becoming disillusioned with LBJ after he pursued civil rights. And we've never been able to rebuild that coalition. I mean, the fact that we got a 60 vote threshold in 2009 was just as much a product of the financial collapse as it was Obama being a generationally skilled orator. I mean, the fact is like you can build huge majorities if the fucking economy is about to like completely unravel, and you know, like it really would have been catastrophic. Yeah. But there's more opportunity there, and so like I just don't really hear a coherent vision for how to rebuild that coalition unless we're necessarily talking about meeting voters where they're at in red states and being okay with that, not chasing these people out of the party.
Okay, so that's the thing. We're meeting voters where we're at. We're like assuming that there's like a fixed number of voters and there's not enough of a strategy that's geared towards trying to bring more people into the party, because I realize it's mostly older people that vote. Unfortunately, I realize that's the case, but old people are not going to be around forever. And the Democrats need to have a base of new voters that they foster and they get registered to vote. Like you see, when you look across the aisle, you see young Republicans, right? Do we have like young Democrats? Do we have them? Do we have the establishment doing the youth voter outreach in a way that's actually reaching them? To make sure that you are effectively grooming the next generation of voters to inherit the party. And what I see is not only Democrats clinging to older candidates, when if we didn't learn that lesson in the hardest way possible in 2024, I don't know what to tell the establishment Dems that they keep pushing forward like older Democrats that I realize have good poll numbers and they have high favorability and they may even have a good chance to win. But at what point do we start saying like, no, we really need to start introducing some younger candidates into this party because we need to not have people die in office. We need to have people be confident that like they're voting for like healthy candidates for one. And we need to, I think, expand ground game when it comes to building out things kind of like Lefty USA, basically, right? I think it's overstated the extent to which TPUSA was actually reaching like younger people, because when you looked at like how like I saw like a YouGov poll that came out recently asking like Zoomers and millennials their opinions on Charlie Kirk, and for millennials it was tepid, for Zoomers it was like negative. It was awesome when it came to older people, but I was like, I don't know, like
it was 30.
But a big part of Turning Point USA.
It was I think it was 30%. I think of college students that were polled had a positive opinion of Charlie Kirk, and 70% that had a negative opinion. I don't know what those numbers look like for kids that are in like the trades, not in college.
But if that 30% was all registered to vote for Republicans because of TPUSA, then at that point it almost doesn't matter that it's not even a plurality, because it's like, well, holy shit, he's funneled them from his org to the party. Now they're voting. Now they're exerting political power, and they can win.
I don't think we saw a surge in turnout for the youth vote, though. I think that the reason why the parties don't focus a lot of their resources and time on young people is just they just don't vote in large enough numbers to justify that kind of budget when you could be spending that money on, you know, swing state voters. But that brings it to my point. We
need to bring them in. We need to do the work of it. It's not going to happen from one election cycle to the next. It is going to be very, very slow. And you want, like, at some point, it seems like people start to vote. like people do start, like, part of the young people or whatever at some point, even if it's less than 50%, do eventually realize like, I need to start voting for the president. Like, this stuff impacts me. It's my civic duty, whatever the reason is. Maybe when they have a family, they eventually vote. And when they get to that point, if you've laid the groundwork in their like early 20s or whatever, then at the point where they finally vote when they're 33, at least they're going to be a Democratic voter. And it's going to be so hard to capture that in a poll or in data that's not like this longitudinal study following a very specific cohort of people that went from being non-voters to eventually voting for Democrats, and to like be able to like truly link it back to a democratic institution or org or grassroots effort. But I do think that they need to take the chance and assume that if they do things that are like deep canvassing, tried and true ways of like having personal conversations with people, with young people, in areas that they need to, like, you know, win some ground back from Republicans or that are purple and they could flip blue, I think that that's what Democrats should be investing in. For all candidates, but especially for young people, because they need to bring non-voters. I think that's who they need to really focus on.
Yeah, I don't even know if I necessarily disagree with that kind of strategy. It just depends on like how much of the resources that you have are you allocating to that kind of stuff. I'm not really qualified to say what the percentages should be, but I think, like, I don't know, going back to the point, I just feel like there is a lot of strong evidence to suggest that candidates who more meet the general population where they're at are typically the ones that do better in elections. Like, this is just a measurable trend. And I hear this theory floated a lot from the people that are like to my left that I have conversations with, that if you send Bernie Sanders into West Virginia, for example, you're not even the first person that I've heard suggest that we can possibly flip West Virginia blue if we just deploy, you know, people like Sanders to go in there and run on these economically populist sort of agendas. There just really isn't a lot of evidence that that's true right now, and you're seeing
this trend of socially conservative, economically liberal people.
No, but like that would be in service of Ezra Klein's theory, right? Like, I would not bristle at the idea of pro-choice Democrat.
I thought you were saying that if you're just repeating what he said. Okay, I thought you were saying that you're increasingly seeing this emerge as like where the average median voter is at.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't say socially conservative. I'd probably say socially moderate.
Well, let me just ask you, like, why do you think the Bernie wing, the sort of like the Pramila Jayapal wing of the Democratic Party, why do you think they've been kind of stagnant over the last like 6 or 7 years? I mean, there was kind of, I think, a big surge in 2018, and it's kind of leveled off. So like, what if this kind of like Graham Plattner kind of platform is so popular, if the Bernie kind of platform is as popular as progressives seems to think, like I hear it a lot, there's just this massive silent majority of Americans that secretly are just like yearning for things like Medicare for all. And
I've never thought that. I've never thought that's like Cenk's thing. Cenk is like, basically everybody is a progressive already. They just don't know it.
Okay.
And I'm like, I just don't see this, Cenk. You're like, I don't think he's crazy. I think it's almost like aspirational. Like it's like a fake it till you make it type thing. Like if he says that enough, that will be true. And unfortunately, that's just not true. Like at best, I think people overestimate how conservative the electorate is. And so that him pushing back against that can be useful. And I think there are different points where economically you would be surprised to learn that voters in deep red states and districts do actually have contempt for the wealthy. They don't think billionaires pay their fair share or whatever. But, you know, ask that grandma about immigrants, ask them about trans people, ask them about reproductive rights. It's going to be really, really bad answers as far as what like most progressives want to hear, right? Like maybe they're on board with the economic populism, nothing else.
Doesn't that justify Ezra Klein's proposal though? If you're saying that these, well, you're going to have to explain that to me.
Because I already...
I don't understand that logic, because if you're saying that these people, you know, progressives would be surprised at how many people like that are in the country, doesn't that lend credence to what he's saying? Because like if that's true, if I take you at your word, then why wouldn't we want to run candidates in those districts and states that are more in line with that kind of social conservatism?
I can explain. This is what I told you in 2016. Bernie Sanders is... would you say that Bernie Sanders is progressive on social issues in the same way that like Kamala Harris, AOC, or even just any like random, like Elizabeth Warren, just any random Democrat that you select, right? I know I just picked progressives and some like moderates or whatever, but he's progressive on social issues generally, right?
Bernie? Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. But like in 2016, he's able to, in the Democratic primaries in West Virginia, he's able to win all of these municipalities and districts across the state over Clinton. And so even if he was winning over Dem voters who might have personally been anti-choice, but in that moment, they were prioritizing the economic agenda over their preference for conservative social policy, right? And I think that's the important thing to activate, because what the critical error that's being made is assuming that because you have these voters that are anti-choice, that means it's a top priority when they head into the voting booth, and that's not been borne out to me.
But your whole thing here is that you seem to suggest that Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump in West Virginia in 2016. I don't know what that's based on.
In that state, yeah.
I mean, I genuinely have no idea what that's based on.
Because he's a true left populist. And when you look at the rhetoric that Trump ran on in 2016, obviously it's reactionary. He's running on like a fucking Muslim ban. But you have to remember, what else did he run on in 2016?
Well, he was like, his main thing was Medicare for all. That was for sure the central pillar of his
Trump.
Oh, Trump.
In 2016.
He was running on undoing NAFTA. He was running on, you know, appointing pro-life justices. He was running on anti-immigration. You know, like he had like five or six
sentiments.
Yeah, he had like 5 or 6 things, but it was like mostly he was like talking about like the unfair trade deals, getting rid of Obamacare,
repeal and replace Obamacare, build the wall, like these sorts of things. But we would call that like maybe it's vulgar, but like a right-wing populism was emerging, right?
Yeah, but
like at least rhetorically, obviously, we know once he gets into office, the way that he governs is no different than any other Republican, which anybody could have guessed. But as far as the pitch that landed with voters in that state, it was he seems socially conservative and economically populist, and he's anti-free trade, and he's going to bring the jobs back, right? He would always talk about, we're going to bring back manufacturing. He's there putting on hard hats and going to talk to like labor unions and Teamsters and shit, and making overtures to reach out to candidates to voters that had been disillusioned, disaffected, and left behind, because they're just stopped being Democrats that even bothered, because they're like, it's a red area. We don't seem like we're ever going to win these people over. So they just stopped entirely. And I think Bernie came in, and even with his socially progressive values, the fact that he's championing and speaking to these voters that have been left behind, talking about like, I know you're heard about the like free trade deals like NAFTA that left you behind. Manufacturing's gone. Union's been gutted. Like he won those voters back in the primary. And I don't see it. That's my reason for, in the general, I think he would have been the answer to Trump's nativist right-wing populism, which to me is just fascism.
It all seems very kind of fantastical. Is that the word? This idea
it's a hypothetical, but you told me that there's the hypothetical that you laid out was so specific, Hutch, of the anti-choice pro single payer Democrats that start popping up and start winning or whatever, and then you asked me at that point would I support it. It's like, yeah, I'd support it, but where is that? So we're both in fantasy land here. Okay, give me some leeway.
I'm not predicting that that's where the party needs to go, you know, be like anti-choice but pro
no, you're just posing this insane hypothetical for me to answer and say, if that were the case, answer it. So to me, we're doing counterfactuals. I'm doing counterfactual, you're doing a crazy hypothetical.
But the purpose of that question is to get to whether or not so you say you disagree with Ezra Klein, is that purely based on strategy or is it based on principle? And by answering that question, you told me you're not opposed to the principle of expanding the coalition to include unconventional people. It's the application. You don't think it actually is a valid strategy because you don't think that's where the electorate is at. I think those are that's a really meaningful difference. But I think your attitude of being open to that kind of unconventional coalition is exceedingly rare in left-wing spaces. Like, I don't think
Probably.
that...
Unfortunately,
yeah,
in some, I'm not going to say all, I'm not going to throw all of my fellow lefties under the bus. But I think that like what you see with this, like what you're calling purity testing or whatever, is a frustration with the Democratic establishment compromising. It's funny that you're talking about purity testing because I feel like, you know, there are some issues where it's like a Dem would be pretty much a non-starter candidate if they tried to like run on certain issues that weren't in alignment with the Democratic platform. And that's good, right? Like seeing like here's an example, like in 2019, 2020, when they're doing the Democratic primary debates, what I saw was a shift to the left and a more progressive shift that I felt like every single candidate from Warren to Tulsi to Kamala to Biden, they were all kind of giving like a watered down version and pitch of Bernie's 2016 platform. No?
A lot of them were definitely taking notes. I mean, he obviously influenced the party direction at that time, even though
they're all feeling like we need to have an answer that talks about expanding Obamacare, and you can't just say more Obamacare. You have to talk about like a public option. You have to talk about Medicare for all who want it. Like Pete Buttigieg like coming up with these like spins on it, right? And
I mean, Pete's model was
minimum
basically
wage.
Pete's model was just like what Canada does, right? Like Pete's model of Medicare for all, like an opt-in kind of thing. That is the standard for developed countries that have socialized healthcare. Like Bernie's standard is well to the left of what basically every developed country does. Like he wanted to get rid of private insurance. And Pete was saying, like, what was wrong with that? What was wrong with what Pete said? Like, that seems kind of crazy.
I think that you shouldn't.
Because getting rid of your, like voting to get rid of your insurance, like to get rid of supplemental insurance altogether, that does not poll well at all. Like people are broadly opposed to that. So to me, like I felt like his proposal was totally reasonable and completely in line with like most European countries and Canada. Like that's just
it also comes down to the fact that like people don't vote solely off of policy. It's like a mixed mash of like there's also charisma and there's also like do you have a feel like your age, experience? Like Pete also couldn't get off the ground because what was Pete's prior experience other than being a veteran? You were the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Dude, there's more people in my apartment complex than there are in South Bend, Indiana. So like I thought he did that to kind of build his national presence, but he knew that he didn't have a chance of being competitive, even if he had the bestest platform, because he just didn't. He was just too young and too inexperienced to reach a lot of Dem voters at that point.
Well, let's rewind a little bit because like you said something I think that was kind of telling a moment ago where you said that you said that a big part of the problem or big criticism that Democrats have is that they're perceived of compromising too much. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like in the example I was going to bring up was immigration. I think Democrats, after like they saw in 2016 Trump with his Muslim ban, the Muslim travel ban, and build the wall, and championing like nationalism, nativism, talking about making America great again. It's like, dude, what time are you talking about? Like, you know, I think at best they're talking about like this kind of mythical version of like Reagan's America that I'm sure was fabulous for some white people and just ignoring everybody else's average experience in America, right? But at worst, they're talking about a return to a time where there was a lot more social inequality between races, the sexes, different people of different sexualities and religions. So like the answer to that from Democrats was being, we are pro-immigrant and being outspoken about that, and we're going to defend immigrant rights, and we're skeptical of ICE and blah, blah, blah. And then they moved so far right on that, that they totally compromised. And now that's an example of where you actually do see some ideological diversity in the party still, where you have Democrats that are more outspoken about being kind of like pro-immigrant, and pathway to citizenship, and I support DACA, and I support the Dreamers. And then you have other Democrats that are like, we need to secure the border. I'm against illegal immigration. I'm fine with deportations, just has to be done the right way. Is that not like a massive split in the party? Like, you don't see complete alignment on this issue, and they've only shifted right. Well,
so first of all, like the border is one issue within the total umbrella of immigration. When you look at Biden's track record on immigration, he was just objectively the most pro-immigrant president since like Reagan's amnesty in the 80s. You know, he naturalized like twice as many people. He issued way more visas. He, kept the DACA protections in place and reinstituted them after Donald Trump had gotten rid of them. His administration focused on deporting like people that were convicted of violent crimes. But
couple of things that he still swung like more right on. I think the examples like after COVID, he kept in place like a travel ban that like Trump had instituted that he didn't need to continue, but he fought to continue. And then eventually like the court said you can't do that and he dropped it. And then another thing is he goes on to shut down the border, right? And the Supreme Court's like, you can't do that.
When you look at the amount of border encounters that were happening by month on his watch, it was a level of influx that no president in modern history has ever faced. Not even Donald Trump. Like at Donald Trump's peak in terms of how many like massive amounts of people showing up at the border, he was like a quarter of what Biden was dealing with at his peak. And that was sustained for like several months. And what happened was that it wasn't just the Republicans that were getting calls from their constituents to take action on the border. It was Democratic Party constituents calling their senators and asking them to take action. I don't think anybody would disagree that what was happening at the border was completely untenable. You know, you can be super pro immigration and still look at the situation at the border and think like this is just not sustainable.
Yeah, but then to me, the solution is not let's do an executive order to shut it down. The solution is you reignite the conversation about you guys. This is why we need a pathway to citizenship. This is why we need to overhaul.
That's different from the border.
All of these things.
That's different from
it's
the
not
border.
related. It's different, but it's not unrelated.
No, but
the reason why you have this influx of all of these people and they're all getting concentrated and like there's a bunch of kids in cages again.
Hold on.
Hutch, I'm not going off the point. Let me finish and then you can jump in, okay?
But you keep interrupting me here. Like the simple fact of the matter is that the
because I don't think you understand my point.
No, I think I understand your point here, but I'm saying that you're saying that in response to like 800,000 people a month showing up at the border, Biden should have gone up there and said, we need to do a pathway to citizenship. Like, how would that have helped the border? Like, what would you have done about the border?
That's like, when Democrats have to actually do the work of explaining how these two things are related, which I was trying to do to you, and then you said I interrupted you. Let me finish. I'm saying that the reason why they should have reignited that conversation is because those two things aren't unrelated. The reason why we have such a difficult time managing these influxes of all of these things is because they don't do education to explain to people there's push factors and there's pull factors when it comes to immigration, right? And these people are fleeing destabilized countries. So that's a push factor that we can try to intervene using like foreign aid, USAID. And then there's pull factors where people are incentivized to come to this country because they want to work, right? And you explain that's a good thing, right? We want there to be more economic participation. These people are a net positive to the economy. That's good for you. That's good for prices in the United States. But the reason why we're having a difficult time managing all of these people and why you don't need to be scared is just because we need to have the administrative processes in place to be able to accommodate influxes like this when you see spikes in immigration, which, like you're saying, unprecedented.
Where is the
unprecedented?
I don't know, like what polling you're looking at to think that would have like. So you're saying as president,
I'm not looking at polling. This is again, I'm spitballing here.
Right?
I didn't say that I'm closed off to listen to looking at polling. I just said what I just told you is what I think ought to happen, and I can I'll bring polling in to inform how I go, like the finer points of it. But broadly speaking, that would be my strategy.
Okay, but how you feel about it personally is different from what is the correct decision for a president to make. And so like if you're President Straighterade and the country has seen like record levels of influx sustained over like 6 or 7 months, literally it's like 800,000 people showing up a month at the border. You're saying, and your numbers are getting lower and lower and lower on like the border, right? Like you're getting really unpopular on the border with the American public because they're seeing the images of just like the chaos, right? What would you have done? Like, how would you have addressed that? You would have gone up there and said, guys, don't be scared. We need to just like, we should let everybody in. Is that what you're saying?
No. Where did I ever say we need to let everybody in?
What was the whole point of you saying, like, you
change the narrative, change the conversation, respond to people's needs. You meet them where they're at, you comfort them, but you don't have to accommodate them to the point that you cave to where people were feeling on that issue. And
but you're not actually addressing what's happening how does educating the public help, Border Patrol and the facilities that we have in place.
Do you think that people's attitudes in this country are tied to empirical realities? They're not. They're tied to media narrative, sensationalism, what they ambiently consume on their social media feeds, what Republicans tell them, what Democrats tell them, what news tells them.
So don't do anything like... Don't do anything.
Can you please contend with that point, Hutch? Jesus Christ. I am telling you that you are acting like the average person, the average voter has a completely rational assessment of what is going on in this world.
No,
and they're not. I'm saying you're assuming. I didn't say that you explicitly argued it, that you sound like you are, because you're like, they're seeing all these people come in at the border, right? There's like so many different times where you're like, Joe Biden was the most progressive on the border, and you're like zooming out to things that nobody can ever see, because when people are judging a president, they don't judge it based off of what Obama did and what Bill Clinton did, and they don't zoom out and look at like a broad trend. They just look at what he's doing and go from there, right? And then you make the argument they ought to zoom out and take into account how far left Democrats have moved and that Joe Biden's actually progressive on this, right? Okay, similarly, you can do the same thing when it comes to immigration. Ask people to zoom out and do that same sort of voter education, right?
I'm basically asking, like, what choice did Biden have to not take action on the border? Like, first of all, do you even agree that the border did become a problem? Like, there were problems at the border on his watch?
Yeah, of course.
Like, what do you think those problems were?
Managing this influx of people and processing them in a way that we don't have the infrastructure to deal with, because it's been an issue that has been neglected by both parties for years. And to the extent that Republicans have answers, they want to do things like mass deportation programs, which are turning out to be very, very unpopular, thankfully. But polling data that we were seeing in 2024, there was a poll that showed 70% of Americans, they loved mass deportations. Then you explain to that same cohort of people, here's how you get that program off the ground. The same amount of people opposed it, because the median voter wants all the groceries in one bag and they don't want the bag to be heavy. So they said they wanted mass deportations, but they didn't actually want it in practice. And you see that reflected now. And similarly,
we're talking about border policy. I'm not talking about deportation, like removals from the country. So you say that there was a problem at the border. I agree. Like, what would you have done about the border? I'm not talking about.
But it's a humanitarian problem for those people. It's not for Americans.
But why aren't? I'm just asking you, like, what would you have done specifically, like, about the border if you were in Biden's shoes?
Specifically about the border, you have to, like, there's, I don't know that I have a satisfying, like, salient answer. Okay, you answer that question first, okay? And then I will answer.
I think at minimum, you need to, like, build more facilities, because if you have a situation where 800,000 people are showing up and your facilities are not meant to house that many people, that's when you end up with totally inhumane living conditions. So, like, at minimum, we're talking about providing more resources to our agencies that deal with this kind of influx. I do like
Congress, correct?
I do like the provisions
Congress,
in the bill
that involves Congress. Joe Biden can't do that himself. What you just outlined needs Congress, right?
That was a part of the immigration bill.
Right, the bill. So like the president, and you know that the president doesn't pass legislation, right? But they can have a hand in changing the conversation and pushing narratives.
I'm so
and
confused.
Whipping their party.
Wait, I'm so confused where you're going with this. I don't understand.
You asked me what should Joe Biden have done in response to the border crisis, and I said, while I get my answer together, why don't you answer that? And you said they need to have more facilities built so they can accommodate the influx of all of these people coming across the border. And I said that would have taken Congress, right? And you said, yeah, a bill. But if you asked me what should Joe Biden do specifically, so you didn't even answer your own question, or you're willing to bring in Congress into that.
Hold on. The president negotiates with the Congress constantly on bills. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I didn't say that he wasn't involved in legislation. I said that he cannot unilaterally pass it.
No, but his administration was directly negotiating with Republicans over that bill, which included these provisions, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So why? Okay, but if your answer involves some form of him going to Congress and engaging in negotiations to pass legislation, why can't my answer also involve that? You're like, no.
Well, no,
what should Biden himself specifically do?
No, but
I'm talking about not only changing the narratives, but also, okay, you weren't listening to what I said with respect to him changing the conversation, and you didn't like it.
What you would do about the border, and you said, let me think about it, and you couldn't, like, so let me just ask.
I said things before that. Can you recall any of them?
Yeah, you were talking about shifting the narrative and educating people about a pathway to citizenship. I'm asking about the border.
A pathway to pathway to citizenship, Hutch. Keep going. So what are we talking about? immigration reform that would involve Congress, and Biden could have helped whip Democrats in so they could expand, so they could reform immigration in this country.
Aaron, you criticized the Democrats because you said that they moved like massively to the right on immigration. And I made the point that the border is just one issue when it comes to immigration, and that Joe Biden was just objectively like pro-immigrant by any reasonable metric. And then I asked you, like,
yeah,
okay,
but
you're
when you compare
criticizing
him to
him on
past
the border.
people, sure.
Well, what else? How else do we determine these kinds of things? But like, when I asked you specifically about
by an objective standard, not a relative standard of how previous presidents acted,
when
right?
When I asked you, like,
wait, can you engage with what I just said? That is a way to determine it, right?
Off, Aaron.
Hutch,
that
is a way to determine it, right?
Just tell me, like, if you don't like what he did on the border, I just want to know what the Aaron version is of, like, you have this political problem. You're getting a ton of pressure from your own constituents to act on the border. What do you do? And you said just like pathway to citizenship. That doesn't answer the question. Like
it's such a straw man that you're like not engaging with what I'm saying at all. If you're trying to boil it down to literally just that, I was the starting point of one thing, and then you interrupted and you were like, "Give me the exact prescription."
You are the one that criticized Biden and the Democrats on immigration.
Yeah.
And then
you said he was the most pro-immigration president, but he also closed the border unconstitutionally. You know that, right?
That was in response to unprecedented in modern times.
He still did it, Hutch.
Pandemic.
I don't give a fuck what he was responding to. I am saying objectively, he made a move that went against the rest of his record.
If you want to criticize him for his border policy, that's fine.
Will you criticize him for that?
I am asking you.
Hutch, I'm asking you, will you criticize him for that?
Prescriptive analysis for that situation was. Like,
Hutch,
if you think that it was totally unacceptable.
I think it's bad. Hutch, will you criticize him for it now?
I would have to take a look at specifically what you're talking about. Like, I'm not
when he 100% closed the border.
Are you talking about the executive action that he took after the immigration bill passed? Give me 1 second, by the way. I'll be literally 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. Yo, okay, I found it.
Are you talking about the executive action that he took after the bill failed?
I'm looking at a press release from the ACLU. Let me send it to you so you can pull up what I'm looking at. I'm sending it to you in DMs. Executive order to shut down the border would put thousands of lives at risk. This was June 4th, 2024. Yeah, and it opens the White House released today a fact sheet announcing details on an impending executive action from the Biden admin that will severely restrict people's legal right to seek asylum. Among the measures announced, the admin will effectively shut off asylum for the overwhelming majority of people arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border once the average number of border encounters reaches 2,500 between ports of entry, reopening only once a daily number declines to 1,500.
Yeah.
Okay, well, 2 seconds ago, you seemed unfamiliar. So.
No, I asked you, hang on. I asked you to specify what you were talking about. I'm absolutely familiar with this executive order that he did after the bipartisan immigration bill was spiked by Donald Trump, after it was negotiated for like 6 months. The reason why...
Or by Republicans, right?
By Trump and Republicans, yeah. They had negotiated with the administration for months to iron out a bill. It was ready to pass. It didn't pass.
When you say Trump, it sounds weird because he's like, he wasn't in office, he was running, but those Republicans acted because Trump, like, they wanted to, like, as Kamala put it, run on a problem instead of a solution.
He picked up the phone and called senators and said, don't give him a win. Like, that's literally what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we got a little sidetracked there, but I felt like I wanted to sort of just get your position on...
Will you criticize that, though? Did you think that this was good?
Avoiding this. Why do you keep avoiding this?
Did you think this was good or bad?
No, I'm not going to let you avoid
that he did this.
Okay? Like, I want you to articulate the alternative plan that you have in terms of how President Aaron would have addressed the border.
Second. Okay. I told you I would have had the president change the narrative, respond to, like, Biden didn't do nearly enough addresses to the American public when you can compare him to past presidencies who did a lot more television engagement, speeches, etc. because of his age, right? Either he or Kamala Harris, ideally both, should have had a televised announcement addressing this border crisis, explained the reasons why it's happening, and also said, I am going to work diligently with congressional representatives, with Democratic senators, Republican senators, and any Republican Congress people that will work with me to overhaul immigration and provide both short-term solutions that are going to alleviate and be able to help accommodate the influx of migrants that we're seeing at the border and accommodate them, as well as couple that with longer term immigration reform to help provide people with a pathway to citizenship. Because the conversation ends up including that, because people, again, it's this like immigration and the border, it's like a broad thing under what people just deem to be like the immigration conversation. I don't see why it has to be just you know, like this tunnel vision focus on just that. You can also be saying that like, hey, these two things are not unrelated. We need to do both at the same time if we want to address what's going on now at the border and help prevent it from happening in the future.
Wait, now hold on. When I look at the provisions in the bipartisan bill, so I feel like he did a lot of what you just laid out. Like, I feel like they did get up there and they talked about the need for comprehensive and compassionate immigration reform. But the political reality that they were dealing with in late 2023 and early 2024 when they were negotiating this bill was a divided government where Republicans controlled the House. And so you had to negotiate with them if you were going to do any kind of bill, right? So like it's going to be a bill where you're going to get some of the things that you like and they're going to get some of the things that they like. If it was just a, you know, unified Congress and, you know, they had enough to break a filibuster or they just got rid of the filibuster, then they can do all kinds of stuff. But he was forced in a position where he had to negotiate. That was the bill that they came up with. But you're accusing like the Democratic Party broadly of like moving super right on immigration. But I don't think
they did, because that bipartisan border bill had just they completely conceded to a ton of Republican demands on it. And then they didn't even vote for it. They didn't even secure the votes that they needed to pass that bipartisan bill. So now all you've done is shifted the Overton window on that specific issue for no material gain, because Republicans don't want to hand Biden a win, because he will have been seen as fixing the border crisis and reforming immigration. And so that's why Trump said you can't give him this. And he's not wrong in the sense that like, yeah, like Americans would see that as a win for Biden.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are certain political realities that are really difficult to ignore when you're in a leadership position. And I think that you're choosing to ignore the enormous amount of pressure that he and the entire Democratic Party were facing when it came to immigration. And I think your theory of the case is that you just have to make a convincing enough argument and you can just change everybody's mind. Like, I think you
Green Lantern theory of politics. You think I'm falling right into what Ezra describes, or what?
A bit, yeah, a bit. Yeah.
Novel, Hutch. Okay. I think that the issue with that is that Ezra Klein makes salient points in that, but I think he also severely underestimates the amount of power that a president can have in not only shaping the narratives and conversations surrounding any issue that's pressing in American politics, but also through executive action. And that's ultimately what Joe Biden resorted to doing once he was stopped at Congress, right? But he ultimately took an unconstitutional action. And now that I've answered your question, I'm going to ask you, did you approve of Joe Biden's executive action to shut down the border that put these people trying to seek asylum at risk?
I understood the political realities at the time. And so I understood that that was something that he didn't really have a choice to act on. He had to do something. There was really no option for him not to do anything.
So you supported it.
You said a moment ago that...
Wait, Hutch, yes or no? You supported it then?
Generally,
yes?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay, that's all I was asking. And I don't think that comports with him being a super pro-immigration president. Yes, there's other things in his record I'm not going to ignore or downplay, but this specific action is a backsliding on that.
You said that you would want to take an action as president to stem the flow of the influx, right? I think those were your exact words, right? You would have to address...
To manage them.
To manage those levels. That is what the purpose of that shutdown was. You understand that? Like, the reason why we get so many people show up at our borders because we have an asylum system where if they meet a certain kind of criteria, they're allowed into the country while the claim is adjudicated. But right now, those laws were written when they were not dealing with like this kind of influx. So like, how would you like manage the flow of people showing up at the border without addressing like asylum? I don't know how you would do that. I don't think you can do that.
Well, I mean, Biden felt that he couldn't figure out any other way other than to bring forth an executive action that was unconstitutional. So ultimately, when you say you support him taking the action, you supported him taking a risk that he probably knew was going to be found unconstitutional. You think he didn't know that before he signed the executive order?
I don't know if it was found unconstitutional. I don't know if it was ever challenged.
It was found unconstitutional.
His executive order was found unconstitutional? I don't think that's true. Where are you getting that?
It might not have been related to this specifically, but there was a different thing. Hold on, give me a second.
I think you're talking about like Title 42 or something. I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't think his executive order was challenged in court and overthrown or overturned.
Give me a second. Let me see. I swear it was. Hold on. But principally what I'm asking is, do you support Democratic presidents resorting to measures that are likely unconstitutional to address acute political problems that they're facing?
I mean, I don't certainly know enough about the law to opine about the unconstitutionality of things. I leave that to the Piscos and the other legal commentators of the world. Like, do I think presidents should be doing unconstitutional things? No, I don't think so. But I can't articulate like why.
Well, I'm not even, that's why I'm saying in just a broad abstract sense, not speaking to a specific policy, but when Democrats are facing an issue where you're seeing the poll numbers, their approval ratings tanking, their poll numbers tanking on a specific issue, they're not able to whip congressional votes to get legislation passed to address it. So all they're left with is executive actions. And at that point, do you support a Democratic president to undertake, like, signing executive actions that they are being advised this is likely unconstitutional to address an acute issue? Yes or no?
I don't. So I'm sorry. So your legal counsel is telling you this is likely unconstitutional? Is that what happened with Biden?
I'm asking you in an this is a hypothetical question, Hutch. Not specific to Biden, a Democratic president. I don't know who it is. Just I'm asking you,
if any
do you support them?
Advised,
Hutch, I'm trying to explain the question to you.
I take your point. I understand. If any president is advised by their own legal counsel, the White House counsel, that something that they're doing is unconstitutional, then
likely unconstitutional.
Then broadly, I oppose doing that. But would you concede that there would be times where maybe it would make sense? So like I've heard the live and learn guys many times suggest the idea of like the next Democratic president should just like do things that they anticipate would, you know, they would use the immunity ruling basically to like stretch that out to see like just how far they could take it, just to make the point that the ruling was unconstitutional or the ruling was ridiculous. Like you've heard that logic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I don't support that. No.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think like Judge Dugan, who is arrested, is like her legal counsel is trying to use the immunity ruling as like case law or precedent to support the actions that she took to like allegedly guide that person who was undocumented out of her courtroom or something, and that under the immunity ruling that she's one of these like public servants and like as a judge who has the authority to conduct her courtroom as she sees fit, and they're citing that as one of them. I don't support that because I think you're expanding legal precedent of what is fundamentally an unconstitutional and unjust ruling, and so it's dangerous to do that even for Democrats to try to use it like selectively, because that case law could be used by literally anybody to continue advancing rulings building on the precedent that the dangerous precedent that was set by the immunity ruling. So there's times where no to me, because I think the long-term consequences are too severe to prioritize these short-term gains that could be extracted by Democrats or even progressives in some like progressive Democrats in some instances. I think it's too much of it's like if we're looking at the pros and cons, I think the cons outweigh the pros in that instance. Well,
we can kind of like bounce off of your logic here to get to sort of like a different but related conversation, which is I just want to focus on this idea that the Democratic Party and the leaders within the Democratic Party and the Biden back when he was president, they need to do more to like help shape the narrative and like push the electorate in a particular direction. How do you make sense of like, and I want you to answer this question without deflecting to any external forces. So like, I want it to be a purely internal critique. Why are progressives not like sweeping in way more elections? Like why have progressives not won enough seats to be in like the leadership position in the Democratic Party? Like, why do you think they've been stagnant for like 7 or 8 years now. Like without talking about AIPAC or lobbyists or the establishment.
I know you think that the cope is that everybody just blames the donors and whatever, and they're not willing to engage in like critical reflection because yes, progressive candidates struggle with black voters. They struggle with older voters. But for one, let's put this in the context. Every single candidate, moderate, progressive, or whatever, you can find different demographics that they struggle with. So that's not unique to progressives that they struggle with these particular factions. But overall, they do struggle electorally, right? And the reason why is that they need to invest in more ground game. They like television ads aren't enough. Like they need to invest in more robust door knocking operations like Mamdani did in New York City to get people literally physically on their feet, mobilized, both trying to get other people out and getting people to the polls, which is why he was able to see success. He was able to flip some Trump voters. He was able to bring people that hadn't ever voted or hadn't voted in years into the fold. And I think that strategy alone, I'm not talking about his policies. I'm not talking about his messaging. I'm saying him getting more people physically mobilized and involved. That's what progressives are lacking. As far as other times where like they don't do enough outreach to black voters, when you were seeing a drop in support, even from Biden, like the New York Times ran this article back in, I think, 2023 or 2024, that over 1,000 black pastors had signed a letter saying that they were not in support of Joe Biden's actions in Gaza. They were becoming increasingly critical. He was losing support with them. Kamala Harris was losing ground with black men. That's why you had Obama go out there and try to do specific outreach on her behalf as a surrogate for to get more black men voting for her. And he straight up just said, I think you guys are kind of sexist. Like he was willing to do that sort of outreach to like try to get votes. I don't know that that's the best strategy, but that's what he did. Progressives need to do those sorts of things to micro target those communities as well to get them on board. At times, like you look at these races where they've lost and they struggled with those, it's because they literally just didn't do enough outreach. So they need to invest in outreach and messaging, literature, canvassing to those specific groups, and try to court endorsements as well from community leaders.
Do you see even the seeds of that happening? I mean, I feel like this goes beyond politicians because I feel like the entire alternative media space has just been so conditioned at this point to externalize all losses to, you know, AIPAC and the donors and all that. There's just never that kind of reflection that you ever see in terms of like mainstream political
that's everyone.
pundits.
That's Kamala Harris as well. You think that book 100
I don't think that's true, no. I don't think that's true at all.
I haven't read the book, but the excerpts that I've seen from that 107 days thing, it's her being like, you know, these governors like didn't answer my phone calls. I didn't get enough help here. I was struggling here. It was Kamala Harris dedicating a lot of time to talking about
well, have you read the book? I haven't read the book yet.
No, I just said I've only read excerpts from it.
Okay,
but
so
and I'm sure maybe somewhere in there's some critical self-reflection of here's what I didn't do enough, and I really hope it's not just like maybe I was too magnanimous, like kind of like a non-serious like internal criticism that like she truly says like I made a mistake or whatever. But I'm just saying that like every single person copes with this. Like in the last debate that we had, you said that you thought there wasn't just Russian interference in 2016, that you thought it was the difference between Hillary Clinton losing and Trump winning. How is that not cope on your end?
Wait, what did I say?
There's no evidence that like you said that the Russian interference in 2016 favored Trump to the point that it changed the outcome of the election for Trump to win, and Hillary 100%. Might have.
Like we're talking about.
Okay, how is that not cope on your end?
We're talking about.
There's no evidence for that.
WikiLeaks. You don't think the WikiLeaks? The WikiLeaks.
I'm not saying there's no evidence of Russian interference. I'm saying you don't have the evidence for the claim that it changed the results to that extent.
No, I absolutely do. You can see what happened to her polling when the WikiLeaks started. That's when we're talking about the like Russian interference. I'm including the WikiLeaks stuff that was hacked by Russians and then given to WikiLeaks. We saw her numbers plummet once that steady drip of 2,000 emails.
But the WikiLeaks didn't make Hillary Clinton be unpopular at that. Like at that point, she had a lot of other issues as a candidate. It wasn't sorry. It wasn't the only thing. Like, do you think it was like WikiLeaks and Julian Assange didn't make Hillary Clinton vote for like the crime bill or whatever it will like have unpopular votes 10, 20 years earlier?
Anybody can pull up the RCP like aggregate of what her numbers were doing during that 2016 year, and you saw her numbers go down, starting with these like started with the DNC leaks and then the WikiLeaks of the Podesta
Comey
emails.
Deciding to do that, I think, is like a bigger thing, and that's a domestic thing.
Yeah, I mean, when an election is that close, you can blame a lot of like singular things. But here's what you didn't...
External factors. You're saying it's not Hillary Clinton, it's Russia, it's someone else. That's what you're doing.
Okay, hold on. But when Kamala lost in November, I don't know what your media diet looked like, but everywhere I looked for like 4 to 6 months was deep conversations about the myriad ways that people felt that Biden fucked up and Kamala fucked up and Democrats fucked up. I mean, we talked about it on Live and Learn for like 2 months straight. Like, what would we have done differently if we were in Kamala's shoes? People talked about ignoring the alternative media. People talked about, you know, yeah, ignoring Rogan. People talked about like literally like a dozen different things. You did not see like the liberal establishment blaming like the donors or whatever it was. Obviously
she lost really in spite of the fact that she had a bunch of money. No, but Kamala Harris had like a record amount of people donate to her, and she still wasn't able to win.
That was a poor way to make the point because it didn't apply to her in that way. But you understand what I'm saying, right?
So like people literally can't make that criticism in her example. Right, like she had money, it wasn't that.
But you did see plenty of commentary. Like Sam Harris came out 3 days later. He blamed woke stuff and people, you know, she was getting it from every angle, and liberals were having this conversation without blaming. Like, you couldn't really blame the left on that election because it was a more convincing election than the previous two in terms of like 2016 and 2020. I mean, it was a pretty resounding victory. It wasn't like a landslide, but you couldn't really blame one thing or another on Donald Trump's win. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, you saw liberals breaking down Kamala's weaknesses as a candidate, certainly Joe Biden's weaknesses as a candidate. Like, nobody shied away from having those conversations.
Yeah, but every time you bring up the fact that her refusal to distance herself from like an increasingly unpopular administration, what ends up happening, it's never just, yep, you're right, she should have done more to distance herself. It's an immediate, you have to understand the position that she was in. It's very difficult. She had no choice but to run the campaign the way that she did. So they're very hesitant. Yeah, I see liberals hesitant to grant this all the time. Ooh. They'll say, "True, you, Hutch." I've seen you and other people Live and Learn say this.
No.
That,
wait, what?
Well, if you want to say right now
Nobody
that
on Live and Learn
she should have done more to like
we all talked about
distance herself from them.
No, we all talked about the fact that Joe Biden calling her and saying no daylight was insanely narcissistic, egotistical, and selfish, and that he fucked her, and that she would have benefited from distancing herself.
How should she have done that?
She should have differentiated herself by just simply saying what she would have done differently on this or that issue. But she just refused to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I swear I've heard you in the past say, like, again, they grant it, but then there's all this, you have to understand it's very difficult, that she's in a rough spot, that she, like, I've heard Pisco say this or whatever. He had like a whole debate with Prime that like why she's in a difficult position, being literally part of the current sitting administration, why she can't differentiate herself too much because you're in this like kind of catch-22 position of like, if you shit on your record too much, then it sounds unconvincing to voters like why they should vote for you if you're saying they have a terrible agenda. And then like, I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that there are liberals that are unwilling to even grant that she should have done that. They look at that and they were like, she did the best that she could. That was some like, she maybe shouldn't have made that one comment, but in general, she can't like throw it under the bus too much.
I don't know if I saw a single liberal say that she, you know, shouldn't have differentiated herself more. That's to me one of the most consistent flaws that people point to make the case that she could have done better. I don't know. That's just me. But anyways, like,
I see that, and I also see that, like you said, Sam Harris blaming the like, oh, did he say that she was too woke, or did he say that like woke people were the reason why she lost?
Because he was saying the Democratic Party just broadly was too woke. I mean, he was blaming literally the trans issue, which was just insane.
It's like not tethered to reality, because she didn't even mention that, right? And then she didn't even win. Like, if they, again, I won't say that she like turned her back on them entirely, but like she stopped mentioning it, and then that didn't even get her an electoral advantage because she didn't win.
But anyways, I don't see that kind of internal critique. I mean, like, you tell me, in terms of like big left-wing voices on alternative media, how many times have you ever heard any of them talk about Bernie Sanders struggling with black voters?
That specifically, I mean, I'm sure like there was an interview that Ezra Klein sat down with a guy who runs Data for Progress back in 2020, and they had an extended conversation about like Bernie's loss, and it was data driven, and he has like some recommendations. Hold on, let me see if I can't find it. Is Sean something? Let me see if I don't know.
I mean, like the big kind of progressive voices on social media, you know, like Kyle Kalinske and, you know, Jank. I don't know if we can call him.
Like, you know, Nathan J. Robinson.
Wait, was he talking about Bernie's struggle with black voters?
Nathan J. Robinson.
The current affairs guy?
Bernie.
I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Analysis: why Bernie didn't win 5 years ago from Current Affairs. It's a 45-minute video of him doing what is probably an autopsy on the Sanders campaign. I would be shocked if at any point he doesn't bring up black voters in this.
Well, I'd have to take a look at it, but I mean, like, would you even dispute the point that that's not really the narrative that we
Okay,
heard?
can you concede that point to me that you were saying that you're like, give me a single example of this happening? I mean, someone big, because I gave you an example and you said, that guy's not big enough. And so I said, fine, how about Nathan J. Robinson? I'm giving you an example of why Bernie didn't win.
Wait, do you even dispute my claim though? I mean, like,
can you concede that there's an example of self-reflection happening? I'm sure I can find an example.
But you haven't even watched this video. You don't even know what he says.
No, I think I have watched this video, but it's been years. If I put like, what is it? Like outreach to African Americans, 31 minutes and 5 seconds. He talks about it.
Okay, sure. Okay? I don't know if I ever said that literally zero talk about sort of internal critiques. But when people like Nina Turner lose and Jamal Bowman and Katie Porter and Cori Bush, like that's typically not what you hear. Typically what you hear is, well, AIPAC, was the reason why they lost, or it was the Democratic establishment with their boot on the neck. And I'm saying
people licking their wounds, being upset, but I know I see that, but that's not unique. And I'm just saying that, like, I'm not trying to feed into the narrative that nobody on the left engages in self-criticism or self-reflection, even if what you're interfacing with is a lot of complaining or whatever.
But do you dispute what I'm saying though? Like that's more often than not the knee-jerk kind of explanation for why these losses occur?
It is, but everyone does that. Yeah.
I don't think that kind of thing
you have on the Republicans. They literally don't even acknowledge that their candidate lost in 2020. That's one end of the spectrum. And then with liberals, you had Rachel Maddow every single day. Russia as the reason. In this conversation, you've said Russia was a big reason. She probably would have won. That's an external factor. And then you have leftists saying, it's AIPAC and donors and stuff like that. I am saying I can give you examples of every single major political faction in this country to varying degrees of outright election denialism to coping over just donors. So yes, but everyone does it.
So you do dispute? No. I'm saying that the way that progressives do it, it is like a reflexive kind of knee-jerk reaction literally every time. And you rarely see like analysis, like real analysis and internal critique after big progressive losses.
I'm not co-signing. I just gave you an example.
You gave me Nathan Robinson, which, okay, fair, that's something, but
he's not nobody. He runs one of the largest left publications, and you said literally every single. You just said literally every single left or progressive commentator defaults to this.
Yes, basically.
So is it literally? If it's the claim is literally,
but almost every single one of them. So like when Bernie lost in 2020, what did you hear? Did you hear about his shortfalls with black voters when it came to like the overwhelming consensus online?
The conversation centers around, again, people being upset about that. But you said that they don't want to engage in any criticism ever.
Rarely. They very rarely do, and they always,
okay, that's what I'm disputing. I can find examples of this.
You can find me individual examples, but I'm talking about a cultural trend. And I'm saying,
okay, well, I can't speak to your specific grievances with the left online, which I know you have a hate voter for.
I know you see what I see.
I don't see what you see, brother. I don't spend my time scrubbing Hassan bots for clips of like him abusing his dog or doing deep dives on Majority Report. I don't do that.
What does that have to do with anything?
You just said you see what I'm seeing, and I'm saying no, Hutch, I don't see what you're seeing, because your timeline, I think, looks a lot different than mine, because what you choose to focus on is different than what I focus on.
We all saw, like when Bernie lost in 2016 and 2020, we all saw what was discussed in terms of like the progressive media pundits at the time, and almost none of them were talking about the demographic shortcomings that he faced in both 2016 and 2020. When I did not see any kind of serious analysis, I still don't see a lot of serious analysis. I feel like every time I ask a progressive why they don't win more races, I always hear the same thing. I'm just telling you anecdotally, I've had dozens, hundreds of these conversations. And every time I ask the question, it's AIPAC, donors, establishment. Like
I would have told you anecdotally, I've had the exact opposite. What would you say to that?
You have people like diving into like granular data to talk about shortcomings?
Anecdotally, thousands of conversations like this, Hutch. What would you say?
Listen, if you're seeing that in your life, that's great. But I wish that was more reflected when it came to alternative media. Because in my mind, alternative media has become crucially important to political discussions. Like, it is real life. People need to take it seriously. I think 2024 was the most extreme example of this. And I think it's going to be even more influential in 2028. And the loudest voices that I hear in the progressive movement are really not discussing like these kinds of shortcomings. And they're really quick to blame anything outside of their movement that they can. Like, I just don't hear them having
Welcome to
discussions.
Twitter discourse. That's why I said it's not specific. Like, I know, like I'll grant that I see this, right? That there's this knee-jerk instinct, but I already said, and I think that you're unwilling to grant that liberals do this and Republicans obviously do it. Like, everybody does this. It's to varying degrees. I think that you're hyperfixating on the left's tendency to do it when I'm not interested in hyperfixating on them, because I don't think it's endemic or only specific to them. I think after every single loss, everybody's licking their wounds. Everybody's blaming other people left and right. After Hillary lost, everyone was like, this country's too fucking racist and they're too sexist to let a woman become the president. This is bullshit. Voters let her down. I saw the same thing with Kamala Harris lost, right? Like, it's just not unique to the left. It does happen. But I think the analysis does come. But if the type of discourse that you want, this, like, you know, like, where are they getting granular and talking about the failures of black voters in general? How much of the discourse online is that like nuanced and data driven? It's just not. Overall, I'd love to see that happen, but it doesn't, and I don't single out the left for not doing it.
I mean, I would surely dispute the notion that there wasn't widespread, very frequent analyses of Kamala's failed run in 2024 that was not blaming like external forces. I just saw so many, like dozens of critiques. I mean, it was all like Piers Morgan was talking about for like all of those
because she lost a presidential election as opposed to Bernie. He didn't lose a presidential election. He lost a primary. So of course the conversation's just not going to be as big. Like there's obviously going to be Hutch, you look bewildered. It's a really simple point. Well, there is obviously going to be more discourse generated surrounding a Democratic candidate losing in a general than there will be from a specific progressive candidate losing in a primary.
I'm not talking about the total amount of discourse. I'm talking about like the percentage of the discourse that was focused on her shortcomings and Biden's shortcomings was overwhelming. And so I'm using that to push back against this idea. Like,
or like, who are you thinking of other than Ezra Klein? You can't name Ezra Klein.
No, Pod Save America, certainly like CNN panels. Like
what did Pod Save say?
Pod Save jumped into her shortcomings like right away. They weren't blaming. I don't know. I would have to take a look back, but I'm just saying, like, everybody was talking about
the criticisms external? Or were they internal criticisms of like how she ran the campaign?
No, they were critical of her campaign like while it was happening. Like they were not shy about pointing to, I mean, they were certainly critical of like Biden, for example. They weren't blaming his drop in support.
Isn't that not an external thing?
Biden? What do you mean?
If you say that Kamala lost because Biden, that's an external factor.
Wait, hold on. When we're talking about like an external factor, I'm thinking of like things outside of the campaign or the administration. Like her inheriting a lot of Biden's baggage, them identifying that is not the same thing as like Bernie or whoever blaming like AIPAC.
Has Bernie blamed AIPAC?
No,
maybe
I'm talking about like
Bernie.
I'm talking about like Bernie supporters.
Oh, supporters or whatever. I do view that as external because if you're going to say ultimately she lost because Biden, what you're saying is that it was an unwinnable race for her, and that the failure started all the way back when Biden they decided not to have a primary and Biden decided to run again. Because then at that point, if it's mostly put on him, you're saying there's nothing she could have done in the 107 days that she had that could have made her win in the general.
Well, I'm not saying that. I've not heard anybody else say that. Like I have not heard a single person say like there's nothing that she could have done better.
But you think Biden's mostly to blame?
Yeah, probably. Don't you?
And just like Josiah thinks he's mostly to blame. I think he's mostly to blame, but that's an external thing.
Okay. Well, I don't know. That feels pretty internal.
But I don't
to me.
think. How? It's not. That's not her.
Because she essentially inherited his campaign, so she just like picked up where he left off. So we're still talking about.
I see that you're like to me. This just seems like picking and choosing what external factors are valid to bring into the criticism versus the ones that you don't think are valid to bring in.
It's still a critique
then you're saying
of the party
you
leadership.
can't bring in like AIPAC or like the influence of donor money, but you can bring in Biden.
No, but it's still a critique of the leadership within the party. Is the point?
That's still external. You think that people that cope about Bernie aren't criticizing the leadership?
Wait, no, but this is like a different. Their criticism of the leadership is that the leadership they think is like intentionally boxing him out. The critique of the leadership in this spot was that the leader of the party selfishly stayed in the race when it was obvious
that's what I'm saying. You're picking and choosing which. It's still fundamentally a criticism of the leadership, and you're just saying this one's more valid than that one. I'm not comparing which one's more reasonable. I'm saying it's still an external thing, and it's still you're still discharging blame from the candidate to something else outside of their control.
I don't see. So you're saying that people saying that she inherited Biden's baggage is the same kind of deflective analysis that we hear from, Katie Porter saying that, like it was rigged. She lost because it was like rigged. Do you think these things are like the same thing? Did Katie
Porter say that Kamala lost because it was rigged?
No, Katie Porter said that she lost against Schiff because it was rigged. She called it rigged in California.
Okay, no, I don't think it's exactly the same. I'm not comparing the severity. I'm saying no, you're not. You're saying that they wanted to, like you said at the beginning of this line of questioning, you're like, let's talk about, let's do some reflection on why progressives lose. And it cannot be pointing to external factors like donors or AIPAC or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Right? That's where we started. Okay, no. Now I'm only saying
it can be whatever you want it to be.
I'm not saying that they're the same thing. I'm saying that fundamentally, at its essence, though, you are still discharging responsibility from the campaign, from the candidate to something else. And you're doing it to Dem leadership. You're saying Joe Biden. You're saying it's unfair because she's inheriting this. You're just saying I have better reasons to discharge responsibility from Kamala Harris than Bernie supporters do to discharge it from him.
She inherited a campaign. Like it's a totally. I don't understand how we're treating these things as being similarly deflective.
I'm not.
That's what you are doing.
Ultimately, it's an external.
If he passes the baton to her, you could look at it as like one campaign, right? Like Biden was campaigning for whatever, like a year, and then she was the one that campaigned for like the last like 3 months. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how to analyze that. And I think your criticism or whatever point you're trying to make would have more weight to it if I never made any attempt to unpack the individual's mistakes that I think she made, which I did like right away. There was no instinct for me to try to like shield myself from confronting like her shortcomings.
You're built different. You know about the Green Lantern theory and you know about the data, and that's good. And I want people to have data-driven conversations and reflection, like postmortems on these things. Okay, I'm saying that's Hutch. If you did that, that's awesome. That's great. I want that. No, well, we agree with the prescription. I don't know that we agree with the diagnosis.
Well, I don't know what we're diagnosing. What do you mean?
Because you're saying you need me to validate your feelings on that, the online left, like the Kyle Kulinski, that Hassan, the Majority Report. Don't give me that face, Hutch. You know exactly what you want me to validate. Do you think that there's an entire media ecosystem that exists to coddle progressive candidates when they lose and that they don't engage in self-reflection, unlike the liberals and the Democrats that are willing to be self-critical? And I'm saying, no, I'm not going to validate that because I see those issues with Dems or with the left, but I see them with Democrats as well. I see them with Republicans, and I'm not going to single them out.
They position themselves as like the outsiders that are speaking truth to power, that would deliver, transformative legislation by, going out there and educating the masses. Were it not for the establishment shills who are basically 99% Republicans and the corporate donors and AIPAC who are preventing them from winning. That's the overwhelming kind of sentiment that we hear from progressives and have heard for years now. And until that changes, I don't really expect they're going to turn things around and have more success. Why would I believe that if there's no kind of tendency to, you know, ask like difficult questions like, why are we struggling more with like black voters? Or is there something that we can do differently to improve those numbers? I mean, that is like,
they need to do that so they can win, but like
Yeah.
it's like money is not always the answer in the same way that, again, Harris had no shortage of money and she still blew it, you know? So
Yeah.
like that like criticism and internal self-reflection. I just thought of a great example though. Hold on, let me pull it up and I'll send it to you, and I want you to read the comments on this.
I mean, Trump and Mamdani are examples to point to and say, in terms of saying like, look, you can beat the money if you run a savvy enough campaign. And so I just wish there was more focus on that and less focus on, well, it's not our fault because, you know, Nancy Pelosi is the reason why we're losing elections or whatever.
Okay, pull this up. I just DM'd it to you on Discord. It's a conversation that David Pakman had 3 weeks ago. Bombshell claim. Give me a second.
Trump did not win 2024 election.
Trump did not win 2024 election manipulated. And then the summary. Nathan Taylor, Executive Director of Public Engagement for Election Truth Alliance, joins us to discuss discrepancies in the 2024 election and how to bolster election integrity. And he doesn't say, like, the title's a little bit clickbait, right? Saying that, like, oh, we know, or like,
I think it was super
that like Trump didn't actually.
I think I watched this, by the way.
I've watched this. It's a good conversation. He talks about they did like a statistical analysis showing election irregularities that show that there actually may have been some sort of interference that's worth investigating. He doesn't have enough evidence to say definitively, oh, Harris lost because of this, or it was rigged for Trump or anything like that. But he was saying you were seeing the same sorts of abnormalities in this particular election that you see in other elections that we know there was interference, like in Putin's Russia or like in Uganda.
I think
and when you look at the comments,
back, right? I'm pretty sure Pakman pushed back against this idea of like rigging. Like, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I watched this video and Pakman was saying,
the guy never makes a claim that it's rigged for sure. He just says it's the basis to do an investigation because these election irregularities are concerning.
Right. And you're saying,
I'm totally fine with them looking into it. But if you look at the comments on this, right? If you look at the comments, again, this is a huge liberal channel. Mm-hmm. One, this clickbait is in and of itself talking like it's a straight up lie. That's not even what he says, right? But all of the comments, look, Trump publicly thanked Elon for fixing the voting machines in Pennsylvania. The minute Trump said, you won't need to vote again, I knew there was a problem.
Wait, but to be clear, I never made the point that you can't find examples of liberals or even prominent liberals that similarly are averse to purely internal critiques. I never made that claim. I said that the problem of this aversion to internal critique, I think, is much more widespread in progressive spaces, because I think they have established a narrative over the years that they're getting rat fucked. That's like the overwhelm. I mean, you and me had a conversation last time we had a conversation, and you were making the case that Bernie got rat fucked in 2016 and 2020. You weren't talking about like his shortcomings with black voters. You were talking about like he got rat fucked. It wasn't fair. It was stolen from him. And I think that was the product. You asked me
about that specifically, so I could talk to that. I spoke to that specifically. But if you asked me for a general postmortem, I obviously would have brought up that he didn't do enough. Like, I remember reading articles in the New York Times saying that, like, okay, that's a different claim than saying I'm unwilling to have the conversation about it. I answered specific questions that you gave me surrounding his loss and these online narratives, which are like a little bit abstract and nebulous. And it's also stuff that happened like in 2016 and 2020. So like 5-10 years ago in some instances. So I'm shooting off the cuff. But if you ask me for an autopsy of why Sanders lost, I'm not just going to discharge it to the donors. And I don't think you should use our conversation as an example, or like just, oh, the DNC has it rigged against him or whatever. Like, those are like some things I'm willing to talk about, but like I would obviously do something that's comprehensive and talk about, yeah, he needed to do more outreach to Black community leaders. He probably should have gotten into churches more. There's like a lot of active Black voters that are highly religious. That could have been beneficial, and there could have been inroads there. MLK was like talked about like socialism and being anti-poverty, and he was obviously religious. Like, there are these ways that Bernie could have done more outreach to get more Black voters in the South, right? And potentially won. Like, I'm willing to do all of that. I'm just saying that like it didn't come up or whatever because it's a very specific granular thing, and I didn't know that you were interested in Straighterades autopsy of the Bernie Sanders primary from 2020 and 2016. But it would include that.
I'm a bit incredulous, to be frank, at the idea that you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the like progressive tendency in terms of like how these people talk about these primary losses and election losses just predominantly across the board. I'm a bit incredulous at the idea that you don't know what I'm talking about. Is this like
I've told you that I somewhat know what you're talking about. It's not to the extent that you're saying it, but I just said that like I'm conceding that to you. Are you willing to concede to me that it's not specific to the left, that liberals, Democrats, and Republicans all engage in this as well? Republicans the worst of all.
You can find some level of this, like anywhere you look in any kind of circle, but we're talking about the prevalence, like the prevalence of the dominance of that narrative from progressive circles, I think, exists in a way that you are not going to find in terms of like liberals. Like when liberals got when we had like a bad house cycle in 2020, there was a lot of like internal critique about like where the party was falling short and why we had lost seats in an election where we picked up seats in the Senate and won the presidency. And certainly in 2024, I've seen nothing but like a constant steady stream. I've seen some of this like nonsense with voter machine clickbait shit. Like I've seen some of that, but I've seen like volumes of analysis with 1,000 different opinions about how liberals and the Democratic Party has lost touch with voters without deflecting to blame to one thing or another. And I think that exists in a way that you just don't really see largely from progressive spaces. And I would like that to change. But your main example
is Kamala Harris, when we know that they literally cannot make the claim that she was fucked when it came to money because she just had a ton of money. So that already precludes the possibility of that being some cope that Kamala Harris supporters who are upset that she lost
say for example,
could even bring up.
Say for example, like absent any kind of blame on like the woke left. I mean, I know that that's what Sam Harris made or whatever. But you saw plenty of examples in mainstream media and in alternative media, people talking. People wouldn't shut up about like the alternative media like absence. That was like the main thing they were talking about for like 2 months. That's a purely internal critique. Like her decision to not go on Joe Rogan drove entire news cycles. And I just I feel like you just don't see that when it comes to progressive candidates when they lose.
Well, because again, if I made this claim that like liberal, all these liberal commentators, Pod Save America, Ezra Klein, all they end up doing, like David Pakman, I'll throw him in there or whatever, Brian Tyler Cohen, Adam Mockler or something. I don't know. Like I'm trying to like Midas Touch that they just mostly coped about her election loss. They said that she did the best that she could have done, that they have some criticisms around the edges, but for the most part, they say that that these voters were stupid, or they blame like third-party voters and Gaza. They have external reasons for saying, or they blame Biden, right? If I made this claim, would you ever just accept it?
I don't know when like people like Adam Mockler and Midas Touch blame Gaza. I didn't see that.
No, I'm saying that like, okay, what you're laying out here is you're like, there exists independent online left media like Crystal Ball and Hassan and Kyle Kulinski, Majority Report, that when Bernie loses and progressive candidates lose and you ask them why, they just start to cope.
Yes.
They do. They point to external factors. Let's say, let me invert it. And I say that same narrative, but I'm like, liberals do that when it comes to Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. Would you ever accept that?
Well, I never made the claim that you're never going to find that kind of external blame from liberals.
But overall.
But isn't that what we're talking about? I don't know. I wouldn't say overall it never happens. You understand?
No, I'm saying that, okay, but every time I was like, you're like, overall, this does happen. Then I would give examples. You're like, literally every time I gave examples and you were like, well, just agree with me broadly that that's the narrative that goes on, right?
Because I'm talking about the prevalence of it.
And then you just keep going back and forth between, I don't mean literally, you can find examples. I point to examples and then you want to back up to, well, overall, it's not. And you just go back and forth between that. So I'm saying if I flip it on you, are you not going to do the same thing?
Hold on. I feel like this is a very basic thing to unpack here. I'm talking
Can you answer,
about
but
like
how would you, if I made that accusation towards you, what would you say?
I would say
about
that
liberals?
I would say that you, despite whatever examples you can find of maybe them trying to do external blame, you will find without any real difficulty, it's going to be very easy for you to find a lot of conversations happening among liberals where they're dissecting like the various ways that, for example, in Kamala's case, she could have run a better campaign. You just didn't see.
So you
that
wouldn't grant it to me.
No, I don't know what you're wanting me to grant. If you're like, what
the same premise that you're laying out about leftists coping about progressive losses, I'm saying you can find. If I told you if I inverted it and I said liberals do that with Hillary's loss and Kamala Harris's loss in the same, they scapegoat external factors. Would you grant me that?
Not at the same level. No, I would not grant you that because you saw.
No, you won't do it. Even though you're not really giving me examples. In 2016, again, to this day, Hillary Clinton still says she suggests that it's Russia. She blames Bernie voters and Bernie bros, and a lot of people are like, this country is too racist and too sexist.
When Hillary lost, are you telling me that you don't remember there being commentary in liberal media about how she, like, for example, like ignored the blue wall states, like she didn't campaign enough in the blue wall states? Are you telling me that?
I'm sure that exists. I'm sure that exists in the same way that you're willing to grant me that there were some leftists that talked about Bernie not doing outreach to black voters, a very specific claim, right? The same. You can find examples on the edge, but broadly, we're talking broadly. You made the claim that broadly this exists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, broadly, there was a lot of cope in 2016. Let's be real.
Okay.
They were all saying the polls were wrong. The poll, did you not hear this from people that supported Hillary Clinton? The polls were fucking wrong. The polls weren't wrong. The pundits were wrong. The predictions that people extrapolated from those polls were wrong.
The state level polls were very wrong. Like the national polls in 2016 were pretty close to the outcome. The state level polls were a mess. They were a complete mess. The polling was not.
Are you doing it right now?
Wait, what do you think? I'm not excusing her.
I've never looked into the polling, so I don't know if that's true or whatever.
Polling. How could I even blame her loss on bad polling? That doesn't even make any sense, right?
No, that people were saying, like, I thought that it was guaranteed. Like, they were like, what the fuck happened? And that they said we were misled because the polling data was wrong.
Well, that's a different thing than blaming. Like, you can't blame bad polling.
No, because if there's
loss.
mass polling data that's wrong, that's the same polling data that the Hillary campaign also would have operated off of. And if that polling data is incorrect, they may have made different decisions if they had known that they were suffering these shortcomings, right? And so these people, a lot of people I remember hearing, anecdotally, of course, and online, that like, the polls were wrong. Like she made bad decisions off bad polling, but the polls were never wrong.
Well, the poll, the commentary that I saw about the polling was just generally about how the polling was bad that year, which again, it was at the state level. But I've never blamed bad polling for her loss, and I've never heard anybody else blame bad polling for her loss. That's novel to me.
You're saying it's one thing in a constellation of factors that contributed to her loss, no?
I don't think bad polling contributed to her loss. I think like the Comey letter and then like the WikiLeaks dumps were the two most impactful factors of that race.
So you think bad polling at the state level had zero impact on like her campaign outcomes?
Like an incongruence of polling is not something that I would like. I don't even understand the logic of like blaming.
It's an external. All I'm saying is that it's an external factor. It's saying that like the Hillary campaign got screwed over, and that Hillary got screwed over. The candidate lost because of this thing outside of their control. Like Russia, I feel like Comey announcing the indictments. I feel like I've already
granted to you that it's not that you never see liberals sort of blame external factors when they lose. It's not that you never see that.
You just think that they're more engaged in self-reflection.
Yes,
and humility. They have more humility.
Here's a good example. Well, I don't know about humility, but like here's a good example. Like the polls were showing overwhelmingly like a revolt within the Democratic Party voter base, a revolt from the voters themselves who were expressing extreme dissatisfaction at the Democratic Party for what they perceive to be like a lack of fight. And what have you noticed in the last like 3 months? You know, like there has been a shift, a tonal shift, a rhetorical shift when it comes to prominent Democrats to try to meet those voters where they're at. I mean, it's like the foundation.
It's an example of this.
The foundation of this would be like the premise of Gavin Newsom's entire social media strategy for like the last 3 days. I mean, we see candidates like Graham Plattner and Tallarico or whatever borrow from Mamdani, who's kind of tapping into that, like, that fight mentality. But the point is like very, very clearly, like, the Democratic Party and the leadership and a lot of people within the party are trying to, like, meet those voters and demonstrate, like, okay, we need to show them that, like, we can fight. And I don't know if you necessarily see that a lot when it comes to progressives after they face, like, a loss. Like, what I overwhelmingly hear is the narrative. Like, they got rat fucked. Like, they rat fucked us. If only they would just, like, step aside and just give us power, then we would, you know, redeem the party and we would have FDR level supermajorities. Is just what I constantly hear. And until that
just see
changes,
these as, like, dissimilar, that, like, to see a shift, like, rhetorically on Gavin Newsom's Twitter, or like Graham Plattner, who's not actually, he's running as a Democrat, but he's not won yet, that really can be, like, considered, like, again, you're seeing these small changes, like, you see Zoran, right? You see Graham Plattner, and you see, like, again, Gavin Newsom picking up that fight, but the leadership, like Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, I see them being very, very conservative, to the point that you've got Ezra Klein saying, no, you guys ought to let the government shut down and exert the pressure and power that you still have to negotiate for.
Isn't that what they're doing?
They're doing that, but like is that always, are they doing it to the best of their abilities? Are they being maximal about it? Is it landing with the greatest impact that it possibly could?
I think this shutdown fight is going really well for Democrats. Don't you?
Yeah, but it could be going better, I think.
Just
because I think a lot of that has to do with there's polling data that shows that just in general, anytime there's a government shutdown, people blame the party that's in charge, not the opposing party, for the government shutdown. So Democrats already have a natural advantage with voters, given that that's the case. And I don't think that I think that it's been good, but it's not been as forceful as I would hope. They were making a big point, like the Medicare thing, like talking about healthcare, right? Yeah. How the government, like the shutdowns impacting healthcare and stuff like that. I think there have been times where I don't think that they've used the media as efficiently as they possibly could. Like, I thought there was too much emphasis on, like, the racist AI video that Trump tweeted out on Truth Social with Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. Do you remember this?
I do.
The thing with them, the sombrero. Like,
I don't know. I have like a really big issue with this, because I watched a Emma Vigeland clip the other day, and it just triggered the living fuck out of me, because she went on.
What'd she say?
She went on MSNBC or CNN, I think. Was it MSNBC? It was MSNBC.
MSNBC.
And she was saying that Jeffries was did you see this clip that I'm talking about? She was saying that Jeffries was making this about himself and taking the bait. And rather than doing that, she should take a page out of Zoran Mamdani's playbook and center the conversation about what they're trying to do.
And she said Obama
Democrats.
does this as well. Right. That, like, anytime that somebody tried to, like, attack Obama on his race, or like Kamala, like, on her sex, like or on her race, like Trump tried to make these attacks, and then, like, Mamdani, that they do a good job of, like, kind of nipping it in the bud, but then they pivot back to, like, talking about their agenda, how they're going to help people, etc. And I think that she was disappointed in the same way that I was to see Jeffries, like, I think he was like, Trump, say that to my face, right?
Right. Yes, that's exactly the clip that I'm talking about. The problem is that the 22 seconds that preceded that clip, he explicitly, like, centered the entire conversation about healthcare. And Emma Vigeland also, she cited one particular clip that was separate, a different one, where, you know, there was one quote about him saying something about bigotry or whatever, but in the full context of the quote, he explicitly said, Donald Trump is trying to bait and distract us, and we're not going to let him distract us, because this is a fight about healthcare. So she obviously got, like, Facebooked by a 22-second clip and didn't see. I mean, she was just like comically wrong about that. But I don't know about you, but every time I've seen
Facebook, well, wait. When you say, but, like, Facebook, isn't that the majority of the way that people are consuming this? Like, they're not consuming a news segment in its entirety. The clips that go viral.
But she covers the news, right? There's more of a responsibility for her to to be more comprehensive in her coverage, right? Like if you're going to go on MSNBC to have a conversation about something that Jeffrey said, you should watch the whole speech, right? Like at minimum.
Yeah, of course, I agree.
Right.
And I think that like you should bring it to people's attention that like, oh, they're only focusing on that. But if the criticism from her is that you're providing the media the opportunity to shape the story surrounding the beef that quote unquote between Hakeem Jeffries and Trump, and him calling out Trump saying, say it to my face, then that's a failure of messaging.
I don't understand.
Because then it becomes about their personal dispute instead of Jeffries taking the opportunity to recenter the conversation on healthcare, the shutdown, the failures of the Republican Party.
He had already done that though. Like in that same speech, literally right before he said, say it to my face, he stressed the importance of this fight. Yeah, but if he says, say
it to my face, and then that becomes the story, then the other thing that he said is deprioritized and falls to the wayside. And it's not like he didn't say it. People, you can draw to their attention that they have, but then that's an argument to me for Hakeem Jeffries to have not said that.
Are you saying that if Zohran Mamdani said something like, I want Donald Trump to say it to my face, that you would have smoke for him saying that?
If it led to the conversation being moved off of the shutdown to their personal beef, I would be critical of that.
That to me is kind of crazy, because like Emma herself engineered that panel discussion to be about, he's centering it on himself, and she was just objectively wrong about what he said. She watched a 22-second clip, and then so to then turn around and say, well, you know, well, many people are saying that it's about say it to my face, and they're not talking about the healthcare, so that's his fault. Well, no, it's her fault in this spot for not seeking out like what he actually said. That seems a bit crazy to me. You can't use aggressive language with Donald Trump anymore. I mean, like that.
She's saying don't do it if it's at the expense of the overall message. If it's to the point that it like muddies the water on the message, is what it sounds like. Because I would need to see this clip. I only caught a little bit of her criticism or whatever. Because like what you're saying sounds familiar to me, but yeah. Like, I'm gonna send you this thing. This is from Schumer. Tell me what you think about this. I covered this with Pisco on Just Press Play. Like Schumer's messaging on this. It's midnight. That means the Republican shutdown has just begun because they wouldn't protect Americans' healthcare. We're going to keep fighting for the American people. It's a 13-second clip of him literally saying that.
Okay, hold on. Okay, hold on.
It's midnight. The Republican shutdown has just begun because Republicans wouldn't protect America's healthcare. We are going to keep fighting for the American people.
Wait. I'm sorry. Did he not do the exact thing that you're asking him to do? He's just kind of cringed because he's old. He said, that means the Republican shutdown has just begun because they wouldn't protect Americans' healthcare. We're going to keep fighting for the American people.
Well, if we're grading, if it's relative, wait, this is better than Hakeem Jeffries, in my opinion, because it eliminated the possibility of it going off message at all. And it's good for like Schumer, but to me, the gold standard for this discourse, have you seen the video of AOC and Bernie walking and talking about this?
Yeah. And it came up in the conversation that you were talking about
David Pakman and that guy, right?
Yeah.
And he compliments it because he's like, these are people that know what they stand for, know what they believe, and that's clearly not scripted. It's literally the extent to which it's planned is that they agreed to meet to film it, but they didn't rehearse any talking points before. They're not reading off of a script or off of a teleprompter. He's like, they know what they believe, so they can trust that they can record a kind of off the cuff video for social media, throw it up there, and it lands. And I thought it's informative. It connects with voters. And it's actually an example of like a longer kind of conversation that they're having with the voter that shows that you don't have to just speak in clips. You can actually get through to people and explain it to them.
Well, I think this touches on a theory that Pisco kind of adheres to, which is, you know, and it seems like you seem to echo him. And it feels like a lot of people are sort of asking for this, where it's like, there's now an expectation for Democratic Party leadership to, and I'm talking specifically like congressional leadership, you have to be like a hybrid kind of politician where as good as you are at keeping your caucus unified in fights when you need them to be unified, and as good as you may be at like whipping votes, you also have to be like really savvy when it comes to, you know, like media and social media strategy. And like my philosophy is like, well, we have like a big bench of people that are in the coalition. It doesn't need to, like, if I'm choosing in terms of what I want to prioritize for, you know, what I value in congressional leadership, I'm going to focus on like keeping the party unified, passing legislations, blocking Republicans when you have like choosing your fights wisely. These things are going to matter to me so much more than like Chuck Schumer's social media strategy. Like I don't know if we need like a Senate minority leader that knows how to go viral on TikTok. Like, who cares? Like,
trivialize it to just their Senator Chuck Schumer's Twitter strategy, right? When you just cited Gavin Newsom's Twitter strategy as an example of Democrats succeeding in exciting their base or whatever.
Well, I brought that up in the context of like him listening to like voters, like responding to voters.
Right, and it's good. It's good that he's meeting them where they're at, and I think that the old guard and the Dem leadership, whether they like it or not, we live in a social media, independent media hellscape where people are more likely to go to these social media platforms for their news and information than they are to traditional media outlets like CNN, MSNBC, ABC, etc. And when that's the state of affairs, like my Ezra Klein, like gotta be pragmatic appeal to you and to other liberals that are sympathetic to your argument is that seems like a politics of a bygone era, and that unfortunately every single Democratic politician, it is becoming increasingly incumbent on them to actually have a robust social media strategy and messaging strategy, as well as like a materially delivering for people to be able to communicate with the public effectively. We don't have consolidated media anymore where there was Walter Cronkite and NBC and C-SPAN and that's it, where it was just easier for Dems to have messaging, and both parties, honestly, we live in this sort of like everybody's algorithms and timelines look like weird and are highly manicured to what they consume, and they need to meet the moment on that, and I expect them to, and their age isn't an excuse. I think they would be better for it. It would be better if Schumer had like the new his page looked like Newsom's and it looking how it looks.
I mean, I don't know if I disagree with you here. Like, I don't know if I disagree with you that I don't know if like the people in charge necessarily have to be the ones that are like, they know SEO and best practices on TikTok. Like, they can hire a competent team. Obviously Newsom hired a competent team. Like, however you get there, I don't disagree with that. I'm pushing back against the idea that Jeffries in particular like did a misstep when he said, say it to my face, because you're saying, well, he distracted. And the example that you're using to demonstrate that he distracted from the point of healthcare was Emma Viglin's like commentary. And her commentary was based on a 22-second clip that she was just too lazy.
I didn't even remember. I asked you what Emma had said because I didn't even remember it. But then you started to talk about it, and it was jogging my memory that I think her criticism did come across my my timeline.
I think if AOC said say it to my face, no one would have anything to say. It's just people don't like Jeffries, and so I feel like they're trying to. Well, they don't. Not only do they not like Jeffries, but Jeffries is relatively unknown, right? Like when AOC is making headlines every single day, even though she's literally just like a single congressional representative, right? Hakeem Jeffries objectively has more sway and power over Democrats and the Democratic, like, because he's literally leadership, right? Yeah. But he has far less name recognition. So given that that's the case, he has to be, I think, a lot more economical with his messaging and a lot more on point, because he gets this much media time and this much media attention compared to AOC. When like anything AOC does like an Instagram live for 30 minutes, that becomes news, right? If Hakeem Jeffries does 3 hours, man, she'll just rant. She'll do it that long. Yeah. But like Hakeem Jeffries did like that's reminding me, he did like a live stream and it had like, I think 1,400 viewers, as low as like 400 viewers at a different point. And with one of the chorus people, is that what that was? I think he talked to like some of the Misless brothers or whatever. I don't know. Did chorus people go on? I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing and combining two things, but I think there was like a chorus creator that Ken Klippenstein was criticizing because they had like 50 viewers or whatever, and they were interviewing a politician. But yeah, but like it just that just speaks to me to the disparity and like the media attention that these people getting, because like the speaker or the minority leader doing like a 24-hour live stream or a 12-hour live stream and it's only pulling at some point 50 concurrents, that fucking sucks. If AOC, who's not the minority leader, is like pulling all of this, like I would like to see Jeffries try to start building out a robust media strategy in the same and platform in the same way, so that his lives are getting more than 50 people tuning in, because he had like other politicians come on as well. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I think for me, I value your effectiveness in the role And the way I evaluate that is just like, you know, when you're picking fights, are those fights successful? You know, like what are you actually getting in terms of concessions? Can you get legislation passed? And I think when we're evaluating Jeffries by that metric, he's been pretty phenomenal. Like he's never picked a fight that I think he's like, every time he's picked a fight, he has extracted concessions from the Republican Party. He's kept his caucus unified every time he's actually picked a fight. So that seems pretty effective to me. So like the fact that he can't go viral on Twitter is like, okay, maybe he needs to hire a team, but I feel like that job is probably packed, you know, morning till night. That's a really difficult job. Keeping a caucus of like 215 people aligned on something, that's not a small task.
Okay,
so
then to me, here's the critical follow-up question. Do you think most people, when evaluating the performance of Dem politicians, use your metrics?
Most people that are engaged, probably, but like most people that are, you know, everybody, no, I think they're more superficial.
Just like, yeah, like normie voters, really like I don't think so either. I think like you and I are political junkies. We're getting into the brass tacks of these things and actually looking at like, okay, what did they actually say? What did they actually vote for? The concessions, like we follow the minutia day to day in a way that most people just don't, even voters just don't. And not only are we trying to expand the tent to include non-voters, to include independents, but also to include just people that have like checked out, right? I think when that's the state of affairs and that's not how people engage and interface with politics, it's incumbent upon the Democrats to meet them where they're at and not to try to move the base to like pull out these standards. Like in an interpersonal capacity, to the extent that I can bring awareness to that, I will do that and you will do that. And I think that that's valuable. But overall, I think that Democrats just need to be more accommodating of the fact that this is the reality that we live in, whether it's fair or not, and try to, you know, push in that direction to have a better social media strategy to meet people on that front. Because it just seems it seems like so futile to me to expect that this is how people are suddenly going to start engaging with politics before the midterms and 2028. That seems like so much harder.
I don't know. I feel like that's depressing for the future. Like if people are, you know, if people are valuing social media virality over actual effectiveness, I feel like that's going to lead to bad outcomes. But I mean, I don't even know, like, again,
that is the reality that we live in. It is highly depressing. I mean, like, again, silly, we're only talking about there needing to be a liberal Joe Rogan, maybe, right? Because we're having to counter all of the work that Republicans have done to ingratiate themselves with independent online right-wing media like Joe Rogan, like the Nelk Boys, like Lex Friedman, like Aiden Ross, right? They have, at any given point, they have all of these people that they can come talk to and get a bunch of clicks, get a bunch of hits or whatever. If Dems could have a similar apparatus, I thought that's what Chorus wanted to do. Wouldn't that be good?
Well, I think there's a massive asymmetry going on, because if you're like a right-wing alternative media person looking to build a social media following and cultivate clout, you're going to spend a lot of your time shitting on Democrats. And when you're a liberal person who's an alternative media looking to build an audience and cultivate clout, you're going to shit on Democrats. And when you're a leftist / progressive content creator online trying to build an audience and cultivate clout, you're going to shit on Democrats. And
right now, all of those podcast pros are shitting on Republicans. That's what the last episode of Live and Learn talked about, right? How like you've got Theo Von, the Flagrant Boys, and Joe Rogan coming out with like they have criticism about Epstein. Rogan has criticism about the mass deportations. I agree with you that I don't think that they're anti-MAGA at this point, but it's not exclusive. Now that like Democrats aren't in charge, them talking shit about Democrats would kind of like fall flat, no? Because they're criticizing the party in charge. And at that point, I think it's to me more of an anti-establishment. No, I'm not saying that they're praising it, but I'm saying that the tendency at that point is anti-establishment, not just anti-Democrat. Not only, it's that alongside an anti-establishment bias, because they're willing to shit on Republicans too.
Yeah, but I mean, they just don't get the kind of, I mean, it's just not fucking cool to support Democrats. Like it's not cool
to support the Democratic establishment. It's not fun to defend them or whatever.
Well, I think a big part of that is because people have these like superficial things that they focus on, quite frankly. You know, social media virality over like Hakeem Jeffries' track record is just objectively like really impressive as a House leader. I don't know how anybody could make the argument, but because people find him personally cringe, they think that he's doing a bad job, and it's like, wait, he's literally the reason politics. No, but he's literally the reason why like Kevin McCarthy is no longer House Speaker, right? Like he's Every single time he's picked a fight, they have got
Pelosi was really effective, and people fucking hated Pelosi. I would say she was really polarizing, and she had more sway over the party. But you saw this with Pelosi as well. Like when you looked at how much she was able to whip votes and how effective she was as like
House Speaker,
yeah, exactly. She wasn't always like giving her flowers and credit, and like, you know, am I gonna spend my time complaining? Like, people don't, you know, give Pelosi her due, like what she's owed, or am I going to say that like it's yet another thing the Democrats need to have a plan to improve on?
Yeah. Listen, I'm not gonna fight you too much on this one. I don't think I disagree broadly, but.
Because I think just like I share your frustrations that, like, again, I truly feel like sometimes reaching people can just be like reaching voters is like, it's like a black box. Again, you don't know at any given point. They like some people, you can poll people and then their actions are different, or you can try to look at their purchasing history, because there are other people that are like, ignore the polls, self-reported data is unreliable, people just lie, they don't even know their own things, you should look at these other trends to try to predict voter behavior. It is like a total black box. You can try to the best of your abilities, but I think it's better to like, you know, like, it can feel very demoralizing is what I'm saying.
I'm saying it certainly doesn't help when you have people like Emma Vigeland saying, oh my God, look at this fucking clip of Jeffrey. He's really fucking up by taking the bait. And then you watch the clip and he specifically says, Trump is trying to bait us and I'm not going to be distracted. Like, that doesn't help when we have like an entire media ecosystem that, you know, it's not only not cool to support like the Democratic Party just full-throatedly, there's also this like incentive, I think cultural incentive in her circles to do everything, to do like flowchart logic for everything. Like there was a clip of them talking about Donald Trump posting an AI video talking about med beds, and she made that clip about the Democrats, like the failures of the Democratic Party. Like that was the most egregious example of flowchart.
What is this flowchart thing?
There's like a meme where basically like everything.
Is it from you?
It's not for me. No, I didn't come up with the meme.
Oh, I thought you started it maybe.
No, it's a here.
Here, link me if it's like literally a flowchart meme or whatever. Link it so I can pull it up.
Here, I put it in your Discord DM. There's very few people that exemplifies the flowchart logic as much as Hassan and Emma. They're the most egregious kind of examples of this, I think.
Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Oh no, nothing. It's watermarked. I think I know this account. Who did the thing? Democrats did it. Republicans. If Democrats did it, was it good or bad? It was bad. Fuck the Dems. It was good. Not good enough. Fuck the Dems. Who did the thing? Republicans did it. Was it good or bad? It was bad. Why did the Democrats let this happen? Fuck the Dems. It was good. It was good. Never happens. Why'd the Dems do it? Fuck the Dems. Got it.
It's basically every conclusion is about the Democratic Party failure. Like if that attitude is so ingrained that your instinct in a segment where you're talking about Donald Trump posting an AI video about fucking fictional med beds, and your instinct is to say, this is the Democratic Party. She literally said it's their fault for not delivering Medicare for all because they wouldn't have this problem.
I see what you're talking about. Like, crazy. I think that there are times where the left actually doesn't have like enough heat for the right, and is like needs to bring that into the conversation more. And I think alternatively, there are times where liberals, when confronted with criticisms that their constituents have, or people like the media has, or people online have, that their instinct when they're met with a criticism of their agenda is to pivot to Republicans. And I think both of these are bad. If you're asking me to speak to the prevalence, I feel like I can't speak to which one's more prevalent, but I think it's bad anytime people are not prioritizing criticizing Republicans first and foremost, especially when they have all three branches of government. So that is obviously should be the priority. That's why on my own stream, I spend a lot more time going after the right and like this much time going after the left, or it's just like literally memes, because the Republicans are in charge. They're the ones fucking up everything, and people don't even know. Like, there's so much bullshit going on from MAGA that to try to cover it all, like you literally can't cover it all in a few hours. Like I saw a tweet from Pisco that was like every single week there's like 3 or 4 Watergate level scandals from Republicans, and it lasts like 2 seconds. So I definitely agree with you that there needs to be a concentrated effort from creators on the left to call out the right more. But I feel like that's like, if I go on to like Majority Report's channel or Kyle Kulinski's channel, like, am I going to not see enough heat for Republicans? I feel like that's definitely not going to be the case.
I watched a bunch of their videos actually in the last few days, and which makes the whole thing so much more frustrating, because I actually like 80% of their videos. I think like they have good chemistry, super funny. They're touching on issues that I think matter. I think Sam is fucking hilarious. And I think like when they're gelling without doing flowchart shit, I think they're putting out really good content. And it's just every once in a while I see these really egregious examples from Emma. But here, let's close on something. This up
and they're looking at like, it's Trump, it's calling out Stephen Miller, it's talking shit about Barry Weiss, Trump's secret police are terrorizing American city, Republicans sweating the shutdown. Here's a criticism for Dems, judicial battleground, why Dems must fight back. Like, I watched this and he was like, Klobuchar, Dick Durbin, like other Democrats are voting to confirm Trump's federal judge appointments. Like, they shouldn't be doing that. I agreed with him. Like, that to me is a substantive criticism of Democrats that should not be left out of the conversation when they have all of this heat for Republicans, at least. Well,
let's close this out because I got to go. But let's close this out on everybody's wanting to know your opinion on the thing. Where do you land on Collargate?
What? Oh, nothing burger to me.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, appreciate the conversation. I felt a little frustrated at times, but I did enjoy the conversation. And I think we should do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. On Live and Learn. That way I can take on all the liberal establishment that is, I almost said a convoy. Hello. Soy Pill, IRI, you, and Pisco, right?
Yeah. So
Josiah.
Josiah, yeah.
Sorry, he hasn't been around the last few episodes, so I forgot.
No, I would love to have you on. I'll talk to the boys and we'll get you on one of these days.
Yeah, it can be a 1v5 or whatever. It'll be fun.
Oh, you'll have backup. Pisco's there.
What I know, but Pisco, like when it comes to like liberals versus, I think Pisco is far closer to you than he is to me. Don't you think? I'm a communist. Pisco's no communist.
I don't know. I feel like me and him argue every episode, so it'd be interesting.
Have I properly radicalized Pisco already? I feel like I would know this, and I would be boasting about it.
I don't think he's a leftist, but he's definitely heavy in the fucking. He's just, yeah. He's he's all about the fight. Like he just wants. He thinks Jeffries and Schumer need to go because he had similar critiques about like their inability to, be good messengers and stuff like that. And I don't know, like I don't know. We'll see. We'll have that conversation one of these days though.
But shout yourself out to my audience. If they want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's just Hutch on Twitch and YouTube, and then Hutchinson on Twitter. And then you do the same for my people. I'm at Straighterade on everything, or Straighterade _ on YouTube. It's Straighterade on Twitch. It's Straighterade _ on Twitter. Straighterade _ Come by for my spicy, hot political takes. If you enjoyed this conversation. All right, take it easy. Good talking to you. All right, bye. Bye bye. Dawes Vidani with $5. Nathan Robinson literally only says that quote. He doesn't know why Black Americans don't like Bernie, and that he doesn't know what to do about it. Wait, no, stop. That's actually so funny if that's true.